That's right. Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And BlueDragonFive.
And look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
Superman!
Superman. Da, 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 da. All right. We'll spare you guys from our singing. Okay, Dragon, so we actually did get to this in the week of Superman's birthday at the very least. Not on the day, but, at the tail end of the week. We're kind of a little late on it, but whatever.
Well, look, let me clarify, by the way. I'm just saying DC kind of like labeled a day. The date itself is kind of arbitrary because, when the comic comes out, they print, the June 1938 when it comes out. Technically it's printed in April, so they always mess with that. So basically DC, they declare a day like Batman Day, or in this case Superman Day. So this is within the week of them kind of declaring a day like a Superman Day. And you know what, folks, I don't think they really made the most of that opportunity. So Tiki and I, we're going to right that wrong. We're going to talk Superman properly, celebrate 80 years of Superman. Isn't that right, Tiki?
That's absolutely right, Dragon. So Dragon, a couple months ago, you and LaserDude99 did a retrospective on all the Spider-Man movies. And I was a big fan of that podcast. You guys went really in depth with a lot of things and kind of went into a lot of minutia. And while I certainly don't want this to be quite as long as that, I believe that went for 4 hours?
That was really off the cuff, bear in mind.
I still liked it. I think you guys did a good job with it. But regardless, folks, we're gonna approach this with the same level of detail and the same level of care. We're really gonna do a deep dive into this thing.
The only thing is, we actually recorded that a couple times.
So I know I remember you having trouble with it.
Yeah, but again, we had a delightful time each time. We'll make that quick. LaserDude, he's a dream to work with, and again, an excellent reviewer, by the way. Just
nice,
top tier talent, that guy.
All right, so folks, what we're going to do here is we're going to basically cover all things Superman in terms of on screen. So we're not really going to get into any of the comic stuff. We're not really going to get into the radio dramas or anything like that. But if it's on screen, if it's a movie, if it's a cartoon, if it's a TV show, we're not going to get into every specific animated series. I don't know, Dragon. I don't know how many. I'm used to Batman animated series where there's a whole minutia of them. With Superman, I think there's probably less, right?
Well, look, let me kind of clarify here. So let's just say we might mention in passing some of the radio stuff because it kind of gives us some of the flesher stuff in a regard. So it might touch on the radio stuff. And in terms of animation, we're definitely going to cover the Superman the Animated Series, folks. But stuff like Legion of Superheroes or kind of shows where Superman just kind of guest appears, not counting we'll cover the DCAU is what I'm saying. We'll cover the DCAU in certain Superman centric animated films, but we're not going to cover every single the Injustice video games. We're not going to really do a deep dive into that. Again, it's more the comic series does an excellent job with the Injustice Gods Among Us video game. So again, maybe maybe sometime in the future if we ever talk about Superman comics, who knows? But the point is that we're just going to focus on kind of the in other media, not counting video games of Superman. That's really what we're doing here.
All right, so Dragon, let's get into our overall feelings on Superman and kind of the history behind the character. So, history, Dragon, that's a good word to use for Superman, because Superman, to me, I'm not necessarily a huge over-the-top fan of Superman, but what I am a fan of is the idea of Superman. And I'm also a fan of the historical perspective that Superman represents. I've always found it really fascinating going back to when I was a little kid watching the Fleischer cartoons, which we'll get into in a minute. Kind of this idea of something from a long lost era. You know what I mean? Those Fleischer cartoons really represent this old school style of storytelling that just wasn't around even in the 90s when I was growing up. It had been really antiquated, but in an interesting way, in a good way. I feel like Superman is the world's most charming and enthusiastic and charismatic museum piece in a way. He's just this time capsule of American values from a very specific point in time in history. And really, that's what I like about the character. I don't necessarily like. I'm not over the moon about his supporting cast or his villains or anything like that. I mean, they're all fascinating. They're all interesting in their own ways. But I think overall, my feelings are I really really appreciate how much of an impact Superman has had on culture. He's kind of like the superhero equivalent to Mickey Mouse in a way. He's not the most complex character in the world, but he's the most historically significant to the genre.
That is a really good comparison, the Mickey Mouse comparison, and it's very on point. So also, Tiki, let me ask you this: how were you first introduced to Superman, if you can remember, like generally? Like,
Oh well, I was like I kind of worked that in Dragon through the Fleischer cartoons.
oh, right, sorry, yes, of course. So for me, I remember growing up, I had seen parts of the Donner film, and for me, the real big, and of course, Superman again, it's kind of like Apple Pie and Mickey Mouse. Like you've seen Superman, kind of like what my history with Star Wars, almost, just not a little bit more in depth.
I feel like Star Wars is also a good comparison, Dragon.
Yeah, for me, like Star Wars was, bear in mind, it was a little more in depth than it was with Star Wars, because Star Wars was just something, it was something in the culture, and you've seen it, but I never made the Mark Hamill kind of Luke Skywalker connection, because I was Luke Skywalker before I really got into Mark Hamill through the Joker and such. So that was kind of my history with Star Wars. But with Superman specifically, the character came alive for me, where again it was kind of Americana with the Donner films. Like, oh yes, my father, he speaks of Superman, he likes Superman. Basically, my father, he kind of again, through the Donner films, he was kind of my introductory point to who that character was. And again, years later, of course, when the MCU kind of got kicked off and he became a full-time Iron Man aficionado, he goes gaga for Iron Man. But again, Superman and Iron Man, those are kind of his go-to heroes. And specifically, Superman came alive for me with World's Finest, because again, that was my entry point through Batman the Animated Series, where they did the revamp, and they basically, after Batman the Animated Series wrapped, they did Superman the Animated Series, and they brought Batman back through a Superman crossover called World's Finest, where the two of them met, and they did the first kind of revamped Batman style, and after that crossover, then Batman got the New Adventures of Batman series on a different network. So that's really where I got a glimpse of Superman through Batman, which I was so familiar with, and I knew like Batman, the animated series Batman, like the back of my hand. Like, oh my god, I can't get enough of this. Like this is my culture here, and of course Toonami and they promoted the event like it was a big meeting, like it was a huge event through Toonami, and then the DVD that was released. So again, that's where okay, I'm seeing this Lex Luthor guy. He seems really interesting. Joker's he's working with him to take down Superman. So that whole crossover really was my big foray. That was my true foray into Superman. And then I backtracked into Donner and really kind of watched the whole thing and really kind of got the vibe of, and kind of course the rest of the DCAU and so on and so on. And overall, with the character Superman, he embodies the core idea of the hero. And one of the things I love about heroes, I've always loved through Batman, but Superman even more so embodies what I love about heroes, and that he's saving other people. I mean, Superman, he's the guy, he'll catch a guy who's fallen out of a window. Superman, he is a symbol of hope and symbol that we could be better. And for me, I think the most important, he's kind of about an optimistic tomorrow. Again, one of his nicknames was the Man of Tomorrow, and that's very much what he is. He's the optimistic voice in the room, the counterpoint to Batman, where he's that guy who's going to save other people. It's like it just boils down to this, where we'll get into things later on in Superman's history. You're doing Superman right if he's saving people and he's smiling. Those are like the two inalienable facts of Superman. He saves people and he smiles. That's Superman to me at the end of the day. It's just he's the friendly guy. People have made the comparison, which is a very accurate comparison, that Batman's is the detective of the DC universe, where Superman's the firefighter. And of course, you gotta love both. You gotta love the intrigue in both of those. And again, who doesn't respect the heck out of a firefighter? Kind of like risking his life. In this case, he's even kind of better than a firefighter in that he can fly, he's bulletproof, he's an alien, he's in a fantastic costume. So he's the most fantasy based kind of firefighter in the best of ways. So again, Superman is just he's enduring, and he's very adaptable to the time. So that's kind of where we're kind of starting with here, and kind of our Superman foray.
I've never heard of the firefighter comparison, but that's very on point. I like it.
Well, absolutely. Again, it's an age-old kind of comparison of Superman. Yeah. So, T, before we fire right into Flesh, I just want to briefly cover the radio show because the radio show gives
Yeah,
us a
yeah.
lot of what we have with Superman today. So, folks, we're going
Oh,
to we're
Dragon
going
didn't like just dismiss like, oh, we're not going to talk about the radio show.
because folks, we're going to go chronological as we can through the history of Superman here. So, again, I feel like you want to like skip through parts so you'll get a good bearing on like kind of where we are kind of through that. So,
I'm
with the early,
actually one of the videos, Dragon, where I am going to set up a comment with time codes in it.
oh, good.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll get into the early years now. So again, of course, Superman created 1938. Again, the first full-fledged superhero, not just kind of your hero archetypes. We're talking full-fledged superhero in the classic sense of the word sense, hence the Superman. We get the radio show, I believe, in the 40s. So again, like I feel like between 2 to 5 years after the creation of Superman is on the radio show. And what we get from the radio show, basically the big kind of hallmarks, the big creation points that we get bled into the other things of Superman we know today. Big one, we get the kind of the delineation in the voice between Clark and Superman with the whole, this looks like a job for Superman. You know, we get the whole, for Superman, which of course years later Kevin Conroy would, not that he was directly inspired by this, but it's so ingrained in the culture. He kind of like, hey, let's delineate the voices a little bit. Let's change them up. Bud Cort years earlier, Bud Collier, Bud Collier, Bud Cort, I think it's Collier. Let's see, we get Jimmy Olsen. Jimmy Olsen was kind of named in the radio show as an intrepid sidekick of
Kryptonite, right?
Yes, we get Kryptonite. That's a biggie. We get Kryptonite, and of course, we get the famous tagline. We get, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. That's a radio show.
And Dragon, one of the things about the radio show that really impressed me, I actually did look up an episode of it. Just the sound design and the way that the music and the sound effects and the voice acting all come together. It's very polished. It's very well produced. Like I really can see like at the time when TV isn't a thing yet, like this shit would be riveting. You know what I mean?
I mean, honestly, when we were talking about Agent Carter and we had the Captain America radio show, I mean, of course, I think the point of genesis very likely was the Superman radio show because, again, that was a huge thing for that character. And, again, it was kind of the, remember, folks, for the kids out there, if anyone's seen, I would have tried to reach the millennials in the crowd here. If anyone's seen A Christmas Story, like the Little Orphan Annie radio show that Ralphie's all gaga about, that's what it was like, folks. The radio was a huge deal. So, of course, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say, if not the entire cast of the radio show, if not many people, I think Noel Neal at the very least, they bled over into the Fleischer series.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess with that, we could, I guess, transition over a little bit to the Fleischer years.
All right, so Dragon, my point of origin for Superman came at the most unlikely of places. A Mighty Mouse VHS.
Huh.
And it was a VHS compilation of a ton of different Fleischer cartoons. So there was some Popeyes, some Betty Boop, some Mighty Mouse. But importantly, Dragon, the one thing that really stuck out, it also, remember that weird Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer Fleischer cartoon?
Yeah, I remember you maybe watched that, yeah.
Yeah. That was also on this VHS tape. Regardless, the Fleischer cartoons were the Superman ones were the ones that really stood out to me. And Dragon, I gotta say, I love the style of these things. Like they hold up immaculately well. Like my point of Superman being like a museum piece, I feel like the Fleischer cartoons, they're not sophisticated in terms of storytelling. They're really just these little vignettes of Superman saving people and these crises and Superman having to deal with different scenarios. But I love how I love how the Fleischer cartoons display Superman in a different point of time before he even has his flying ability. He's jumping in this cartoon.
Certainly.
So it's just a really fascinating kind of time capsule of where Superman was, but stylistically, it's just mind-blowing still.
So if I'm remembering correctly, the Fleischer Superman, there were 17 directly by the Max Fleischer studios, and then there were basically I'll say this, I didn't really give them a good one. I didn't give them, there were 8 films following that by famous, was it Famous Cartoons or Famous Pictures? Basically the Famous studio. there were 8 ones made afterwards, and they kept up the Fleischer quality. Again, it wasn't like the honest to goodness Fleischer, but again, it was pretty consistent. So that's kind of good news for that. So again, we got like a number of films. You got to remember, folks, these were like these were essentially these were like the movie serials that we would get, but these were animated and they were also put in theaters as well back in the day. Mm-hmm. And I believe it's like the late 40s, early 50s, definitely late 40s at the very least. Fleischer, that was. Let's see. So we
the rotoscoping is definitely like a groundbreaking technique, Dragon.
Again, honestly, with the rotoscoping was amazing, and again, with the rotoscoping, what we get is we get really kind of we get heft and theory and animation. Whereas this is something like years later, of course, kind of for more of a science definitely on people's minds this year. Incredibles, they have to work, and you have a superhero, and you have someone who's going to have to work in the physics. So, like, if you have super strength, how does that work? How do you realize kind of something you've read in the comic and you've read on paper to animation? How do you animate that? And of course, like, they looked at like a Jungle Book to kind of get movement down, like heft of characters, like how someone kind of moves something upwards. And we have that all over the place in with rotoscoping, which again is pretty much in that era. Which of course, so we have to a big extent in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh yeah.
Rotoscoping was big in the early days of animation, and doing that's like the closest thing you could have. It was a great.
Ralph Bakshi actually used a lot of.
Yeah. And again, it's kind of like all these shorts were kind of a beautiful marriage between radio and animation. It's kind of where radio and animation met with rotoscoping, this technique that kind of made it like it's kind of almost better than live action to an extent,
Well, I mean, almost to kind of tie it back to the Incredibles, Dragon, especially Incredibles 2, with the way technology is involved. Incredibles 2 is like more spectacular than any superhero movie I've seen in the last 5 years in terms of just sheer visual splendor.
So I guess a few things we got to mention with Fleischer before we go any further. Is that one, of course, Tiki, as you said, he's leaping a tall building in single bound all over the place here. And of course, we start there, and Fleischer, they had the idea, basically there are some other technical places where I think they were doing it at the same time, but let's face it, just for simplicity's sake and just for the awesome sake of it, that Fleischer came up with Superman flying. Because one, it was like constrained on the animation. We can't just have him leaping all over the place. That costs money. That's difficult to do. Where we have Superman flying, which one looks more spectacular, kind of makes the cape make a little bit more sense than just kind of like an homage to kind of the circus strongmen, and the flying, it stuck so tremendously well. Yeah, let's make them fly. Why not?
It's one of those things where it's like anyone, like you would think for sure it was with him from the very beginning.
I know, again, you think it's a no-brainer, but no, it's, again, that had the process of animation. I just love the story behind it, just being just from a place of practicality. That's why he flies.
Drake, one of the things I want to address with Fleischer is just how much of a leap and bound it was in terms of ambition from the stuff that Fleischer was doing beforehand, like the Betty Boop and the Popeye of it all. This wasn't necessarily sophisticated storytelling, but it was dramatic storytelling. It was storytelling with weight behind it, as you say.
Yeah, and with that weight...
Yeah, go ahead.
With that weight, what you're hitting on, Tiki, is that, again, it has fantastic tone, lighting, shadow, and basically like builds to these moments.
Incredible, yeah.
Remember that one moment with the like we have the radio broadcast and we reveal our Nazis, and it was such a fantastic, like an ominous boom revealed, it's like something ominous this way comes, and the way we build atmosphere and we build tone, and again the lighting and the shading, the beautiful kind of cell animated glory before you, it's flawless. And again, speaking of that cell animated glory, I want to mention that of course the Fleischer series is a huge inspiration for Batman the Animated Series. Of course, without Fleischer, I don't think you have the iconic streamlined design of Batman the Animated Series. There's a chance it could have looked like either a cross between, like, best case scenario would have looked kind of like Tiny Toons, like a parody of Tiny Toons. Worst case scenario would have looked like a generic G.I. Joe type. That basically without Fleischer, that's kind of fate. Well, again, maybe not G.I. Joe, but it would have been like that Super Friends era, which is like one slight cut above G.I. Let's be frank, it's like one slight cut above G.I. Joe. It's like paper cut at animation. I'm sorry to be harsh on Hanna-Barbera and Filmation, but let's be frank. Come on. So the point is, we owe so much to the Fleischer again, Batman animated series and Space Ghost. Those are like the big inspirations behind Batman. And of course, the two other things, the robot design. The robot design is huge for Fleischer. We had like no one animated a robot like that at that time. We had kind of a wind up kind of mechanism of these giant robots. Like the physics of superheroes came alive in that. Where if a building fell, it would bend a little because it would kind of. It's like maybe it wouldn't work like that in real life, but there's enough believability behind that animation to sell you on it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And also a huge staple we have of Superman that we get in Fleischer is the plane landing. He lands a plane,
Oh yeah,
nose first, which of course is in all sorts of, basically almost every interpretation of Superman is always landing a plane. And we have kind of Fleischer to thank for that.
All right. I feel like much in the same way that the radio drama kind of did some hallmarks in terms of the mythology of Superman, Fleischer, like, visually did a lot of hallmarks. You know what I mean?
Certainly. And also, I recommend this to you, Tiki, and to everybody else out there. There's a former, I don't know if I think he's a former Disney artist by the name of Rob Pratt. Now, Rob Pratt, he's done 2 short Superman 2D animated films that are in celebration of the Fleischer style. It's the Fleischer style with a lot of great it kind of homages various Supermans through the air. It's kind of the ultimate tribute piece. There are 2 films. One is all Fleischer. The other one is kind of in the like what if Fleischer did Bizarro Superman.
Mm.
And they're both spectacular. They're both like 3 minutes long. I got to highly recommend to you and anyone interested because they capture the Fleischer style and the physics of everything, but they also have like deep cuts like Superboy and stuff, and it's spectacular.
Cool.
All right. So speaking of kind of again, so the Fleischer shorts were of course released theatrically, albeit as movie serials. Speaking of movie serials, let's talk a little bit about the actual movie serials.
Yeah, George Reeves.
Well, yes, but even before George Reeves, there was
you're right. There was someone before George Reeves. I keep forgetting about that.
Yes, Tiki,
I'm sorry.
One man who George Reeves, believe it or not, and he was also in the Richard Donner Superman, a cameo.
Oh man,
Kirk Allen. So Kirk Allen, basically, he was kind of, I want to say he was a Western star beforehand. So Kirk Allen, he was a really straightforward Superman. What we get in the serials really is, I believe, the first in live action we get Lois Lane and we get Lex Luthor.
And I find it fascinating that Lex Luthor started out as just this like generic mad scientist named Luthor.
Yeah, it's pretty on the money. Lex was really kind of undefined in the beginning. It was just, I think the bald gimmick was all he really has. He was a bald mad scientist. And famously with the serials, and this is kind of your definite Fleischer crossover right here, is that they couldn't get the flying right. So what happens is every time Kirk Allen's Superman would take off, it would turn to animation, like when Dracula in the Abbott Costello meet Frankenstein, or like in the some of the Dracula movies. Specifically, I'm remembering Abbott Costello meet Frankenstein. I don't know how many other Bela Lugosi or Dracula films they did this in, but when he would turn into a bat, it had to be animation. So it's exactly like that effect, but for Superman taking off and flying, it had to be animation.
And you know what? I gotta say, like, watching some of the footage, it's a pretty, like, it's not necessarily convincing, but it's a cool effect. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost kind of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit-esque.
Vaguely, yes. And two big things of Superman we get with the serials that we have to address. One, we get mild-mannered Clark Kent. Clark Kent was just pretty much, in the Fleischer shorts, we got very little Clark Kent. When we did get Clark Kent, let's just say it was kind of a prototype for George Reeves. I'll say that much. It was kind of a prototype for what we get with George Reeves later on. But we get the whole mild-mannered maybe not bumbling, but it was kind of a timid reporter. So again, mild-mannered in every sense of the word. Like usually he's a nice guy, just like he's unassuming nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we really present Superman as like an old movie hero, again, possibly tapping into like any Western or any other serials that Kirk Allen did at the time. It's like, he's a white hat. It's like, hey, there's Superman. He's a very straightforward guy.
The serials were kind of like the first time that we really started to look at Superman as the Boy Scout. You know what I mean? Kind of like that big symbol. Or he was just kind of like a really popular character.
I think you're right with the Boy Scout comparison. Again, George Reeves definitely takes off the Boy Scout idea, but I think it gets started with Allen.
Mm-hmm.
So again, speaking of George Reeves, let's talk kind of the bridging from the movie series, there were two movie series. I think one was Superman versus the Atomic Men. The Atomic Man. Again, Kirk Alyn had one, then George Reeves had Superman versus the Atomic Man, or the Mole.
Yeah, yes.
Mole Man or Atomic Man, one of them.
George Reeves had the Atomic Men.
Right. And of course, the success of that bridged us into the Adventures of Superman TV show, which is what everybody remembers, especially what Mark Hamill remembers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mark Hamill, believe it or not, folks, before Batman, he was a huge Superman fan. Not only just probably bridging from the show, but definitely the comics and everything. So he was a big, lifelong Superman fan before Batman really kind of entered the fray for him. Fun fact. So I'll say this with Reeves. I think George Reeves, he had a really great, unique take on Superman and Clark Kent. Honestly, it's like a very rare Clark Kent that you see with Reeves.
I honestly feel like with George Reeves, the thing about it is his performance was good. I just feel like stylistically, these don't really hold up as well as something like the Fleischer cartoons. Because with the Fleischer cartoons, you can kind of appreciate them for their artistic merit, whereas these are just kind of like, pretty obviously made a little bit on the cheap. To me, the more interesting thing about George Reeves, and I know we don't really want to spend a whole ton of time talking about this, but sure. I just love the mythology behind George Reeves. And I say that in kind of like a morbidly curious kind of way. You know what I mean?
Well, certainly. Again, George Reeves definitely maps out kind of the old, again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you get the age-old Superman curse, the whole that silly
thing. Brandon Routh was in Scott Pilgrim.
But yeah, of course, there's a lot of intrigue about what happened with the Reeves, but building to that for a moment. Let's build to that for a moment. Is that?
I'm sorry, Dragon. I got nothing in terms of the actual show except for the I Love Lucy episode, which is an interesting kind of. It's almost like a commentary on his point of view on playing Superman at the time.
It is, and getting to like kind of how he's perceived as Superman and everything. Just speaking of him as Superman, period. So I think he's definitely he's kind of the most American Superman by the 50s standards. He's a reflection of a Superman of the 50s, and again, at a time where you need kind of an ideal. So he's definitely a Superman that is representative of what we want the American ideal to be, and that we want kind of a friendly guy who's like a hero of the children, and just kind of like, oh man, it's Superman. It's like everybody like an very apple pie Superman.
Uh-huh.
And I'll say this to you. I think you kind of raised an interesting point. I feel is that I think The Adventures of Superman is a show that probably, in many respects, probably went on longer than it should have. Again, it was kind of a goodwill show, and that we wanted just to kind of keep it going because it made everybody feel all right.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I love the black and white. Like the first season or two, like the first season specifically, that's the black and white. I love the black and white beginnings, and then when it got, I just kind of dropped interest in when it was colorized. I don't know if it's just like a preference to black and white or not, because it just felt like we get a different Lois Lane. Nothing against Noel Neal, but I like the Phil Coates Lois Lane a little bit more. But the point is, though, it kind of felt like more historic and more like, yeah, this is a period of time where we had this Superman. It was just kind of like fun. It was the movie serials but televised. It's really what it was, where Clark Kent was kind of this intrepid reporter, but he wasn't the bumbling Clark Kent that we all know and love. But at the same time, he was a smart Clark Kent in that he could kind of have this fourth wall wink to the audience at the end of the episodes, where he just says, "Well, Lois, I'll be sure to thank Superman next time I see him." The camera. That's the thing. He was just like George Reeves. He could get tough with people as Clark Kent. That was always kind of fascinating to me. And it's Superman having fun with the medium of TV. That's really what you get. That's the big takeaway from Adventures of Superman. Like the thing for me, like I couldn't get enough of watching the show is I love it when Superman would basically, they played him like a circus strongman a lot of the time, where he would lift the bag as the old, again, they can only do like gangsters and like guys with guns and suits and everything, like landowners and stuff. He basically lift them to the ceiling, and Superman holding them up, they couldn't do anything to him. He picked them up like children, and they're helpless. And that always cracked me up. Like, oh my God, that's how he would stop them. He literally like lifts them up off their feet, and they're a little squirm around, and he's like a helpless toddler. It's hysterical.
I mean, I guess I'm just kind of coming at it like, obviously, I'm a big, and I know obviously you're an animation fan too, but I feel like the George Reeves stuff. It's harmless. It's nice fun. It's fluffy entertainment. But I feel like, as we already kind of addressed with the Fleischer cartoons, I would gladly sit down and marathon the Fleischer cartoons over the George Reeves stuff, just because the Fleischer cartoons just have that dramatic heft to them.
Sure,
And
sure.
stylistic integrity.
I think the important thing to nail down overall with Adventures of Superman is that it really is that in the way that the '60s Batman show is a reflection of the '60s era of Batman. This really is reflective of the early years of Superman, where again he would, before Luthor and the colorful villains were introduced, you had Superman just again like in the very first issue, there's a guy beating his wife, and like Superman would break that up, and he would again just gangsters and suits, like the famous car image, where people these gangsters, they kidnapped a girl, and like Superman's lifting the car over. So the very iconic, the Action Comics #1 shot. Mm-hmm. That's essentially the Superman that we get here. Just that we can't afford like him lifting the whole car over his head. That's pretty much that's essentially it. And there is one thing I recommend you check out. To one of these, anyone interested too, is like there's this one hysterical bit of PSA marketing that they did. It's the Kellogg's commercial. I know you remember the Kellogg's commercial, don't you?
Sure.
The Kellogg's commercial cracked me up because they were afraid that one, because they had a cereal tie, much like in Toy Story 2, Woody had Cowboy Crunchies, which was again back in the '50s. You had to basically fund your show through these marketing ploys. And it was just so hilarious, just the randomness of it's like a wholesome breakfast, and it's so pleasant, so '50s pleasant, where it's like, hey, Jimmy, you want some cereal? Like, Mr. White, can't we just take a break from talking about the Daily Planet to have some cereal? It says, oh, we're talking Kellogg's. Why, sure. It's just, again, it was just, literally, Perry White comes in saying, Kent, where are you? He says, Chief, we're having breakfast here. Oh, breakfast? Is that Kellogg's? Can I have some? That's the thing. Just so
absurdity of like the fact that the censors wouldn't allow Lois to be eating breakfast with them,
and of course, not realizing the fact that Jimmy. Apparently, Jimmy had like he slept over at the place. Yet Lois can't. It's ridiculous, but it's like. It's so wholesome. It's '50s wholesome, along with again like the I Love Lucy era, where again we have Kellogg's commercials and I Love Lucy, and it was just kind of pleasant. It's what America needed. That's what Adventures of Superman was, and we just kind of kept it coming. And of course, mysterious tragedy struck.
Mm.
Where let me ask you this, Stiggy, where do you land on? You think murder or the other alternative? What do you think?
I mean, honestly, I would kind of land more on suicide, to tell you the truth. Like with all the signs kind of pointing towards. With him being like really, really bottled up with his frustration in the show.
That's true, but you see,
I don't know.
That's fair, folks. We don't have a clear-cut answer. I'm always been in the camp of murder because again, Jack Larson, he's gone on record saying like the Reeves had affiliations with women who kind of knew mobsters, and there was a chance that woman that girlfriend he had at the time was there. And she saw these she knew where two bullet holes, basically where the bullet holes were. And that freaked Jack Larson out. He always kind of kept quiet about that. And it always felt like, okay, but he basically he left the scene when she was, finding that out. It was like, I don't know.
Well, you see, I didn't know that, Dragon.
Well, yeah, and of course, Hollywoodland presents like a few of those theories in the movie and such. So the point is, I've always suspected, because again, no prints on the gun and everything, and the fact that he was going to be able to direct. As we know, a lot of actors, when they play Superman for a while, they play like an iconic role for a while. They would like the chance to kind of write and direct and such, and we see that, and we're going to definitely get into that with a few of these Superman actors. And again, like he was promised, like they're going to go back for another season. He was hoping to direct, and he loves kind of the interaction with kids and everything. So yeah, the role possibly grew on him. So again, the jury's out. But again, you absolutely understand the dangers of being typecast in a role, which stuff like Gray Ghost from Batman the Animated Series, with Adam West, has definitely warned us about. There is definitely a danger in being typecast. So Reeves walks the line of like the joys of being an American icon, and of course the potential the potential demons that can come from that. So again, it's a mixed bag with that.
Sure.
So let's go from one Reeve to another here. Let's go from George Reeves to Christopher Reeve.
It's so weird, right?
It is. It is. It's like maybe like there's like secretly all the perfect Superman actors are Reeve, but you have to like go through your phone book and find them. Maybe that's it. maybe that's the cast. Maybe that's the X factor.
All right, so this is probably going to be the longest point of our conversation right here, folks. Strap yourselves in. We're going to go through all 4 of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies.
So right off the bat, I think just overall, it's very safe to say, at least for me, Christopher Reeve and a lot of people, he's the definitive Superman. Like in the way that Kevin Conroy is the definitive Batman, Christopher Reeve is easily. When you think Superman, I think Christopher Reeve.
I think the big thing that Reeve brought to the role was the bumbling quality of Clark Kent, like the physicality of all that. Like that's something that we really hadn't seen up until this point. Like Clark Kent, like kind of like the idea that Clark Kent and Superman should be as different from each other as humanly possible.
Absolutely, and again, it's a brilliant move. And the thing with Reeve is that magically in. So I'm trying. There's a lot to unpack with Christopher Reeve here. It's so great. In the first Superman film, which is my favorite, and I think a lot of people's favorite, at the end of the day, it's kind of I use the Superman 2 comparison for a lot of it. When we have sequels, I use this comparison like for Deadpool 2 and Incredibles 2. I always use that. Where again, at the end of the day, I think you're gonna have a little more fondness for the original, but the second one is it's fantastic. We get to kind of kick off the next stage of the story in many respects. And there's a scene in the first Superman movie after like the big flight with Lois where they did this so cleverly, Tiki, is that they had like basically they had the rear projection system. They projected the film onto the background. That's how they made him fly in certain scenes. And what they did in the scene is Superman flew away, and that was footage. That was film that they practically put in the background. They projected onto a screen so that in real time Christopher Reeve as Clark Kent is at the door knocking, like literally like less than 17 seconds after Superman flies away. and he walks through, and then here's the scene I'm talking about here. So Christopher Reeve, just through acting, just through sheer acting, almost without, I think he says maybe one word where he addresses Lois, where he's contemplating, telling her who he is, and he takes off his glasses and he perks up. He stands up, and he transforms into Superman before your eyes. And folks, no, it's not CG, no, it's not a cut, it's not an edit, it's sheer acting. And like he says, Lois, and in the way he says, and then she walks back, and you see he turns back into Clark Kent right before your eyes. It's astonishing.
Yeah, I feel like it was almost kind of like method acting before hardcore method acting became a thing.
Exactly. And let me say this.
I feel like him as a person kind of obviously like his life story kind of mirrors Superman in a lot of ways, but just him and his ideology even at the time was just very much in tune with what the character represented. I'd say more so than any other of the actors up until this point.
Most certainly. And folks, I want to try to keep this as Reeve point as I can here, because again, we're not just going to talk. Well, don't worry, we're going to talk about Christopher. We're also going to talk about the movies too. But with my favorite making of story, my 2 favorite making of stories of film period are the first Richard Donner Superman film, based on the making of the Superman film, and Toy Story. Those are my 2 favorite making of stories in all of film. So I know this. The production is at the back of my hand. And Superman, in casting Superman, what they did is, they went for big stars for the other roles, so they can get and they ended up getting an unknown for Superman. Because you get Lex Luthor and Jor-El, you get Brando, we get Gene Hackman, huge names for the time, and we go for an unknown quality because they realized very simply, and this is why Richard Donner, I think, is one of the finest filmmakers ever, one of the great directors. Again, without him, we have no superhero films, because he did it so right with 78, with Superman 78. And you got to remember, folks, 1975 to 1979, we get some of the most fantastic films ever. Think about it, we get Jaws in 95. I think we get Rocky I'm sorry, not 95, sorry. We get Jaws in 75. You get Rocky in 76, Star Wars 77. You get Superman 78, and you get the Muppets in 79.
Oh my God, the Muppets!
That's what I'm saying. You get 5 super iconic, one as memorable and as remarkable as the last.
That was a good run, Dragon. That was a good run.
I'm saying, and they realized it just would have been they had the carte blanche enough that they could have gotten any actor they wanted for Superman. They went to every name, and they realized that Richard Donner, to his credit, realized, it's just going to be the actor in a costume. They're just going to be distracted by it's Robert Redford flying in a Superman cape. It's going to be Paul Newman flying. It's Dustin Hoffman as Superman. It doesn't work. And then they just realized he cast an unknown, and Christopher Reeve sold him. And the beauty of the story of how Richard Donner cast Christopher Reeve is just, Christopher Reeve walked in, and he was really thin in that day. He was a beanpole, as his acting teachers have remarked about him. Oh, Christopher Reeve, that beanpole, he can't play Superman. He just, it's this beautiful moment of cinema history, Tiki, where Christopher Reeve just, sir, I promise you, I'll put on the weight. I used to be a jock in high school. I'll put on the weight. I'll be exactly what you need me to be. This kid, I'm taking a chance on you. Because remember, Christopher was he's in his mid-20s, I guess, during this film. He was a really young guy during all this.
Yeah.
He was very forward-thinking, very talented. Anyway, so I'm going off here and just all this Reeve stuff. So let's talk about the movie itself. T. What kind of stands out to you about the first Superman movie?
What really stands out to me, Dragon, is it feels like a 3-act play. I feel like we made that comparison in the documentary, and that really stuck with me. Just how different and how dramatically tone-wise each of the 3 acts kind of because Act 1 is kind of the mysterious, the alien, kind of the cold and calculated Krypton stuff. Act 2 is all the wholesome American pie of it all, and then Act 3 is the wonder and the splendor and the humor. And I just think all of that just comes together really beautifully well and just sets the tone of just what great storytelling should be. But really, like I said, with the play of it all, with the theatricality of it all, it feels like it's more grand than just a movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, in connection, of course, the Williams score is a huge reason that not only do you have an actor, basically again you have a lot of draws and a lot of again everything. It's firing all cylinders, this movie, because you have that 3-act structure. We have at least 3 different movies being given to you as one. And this is when I cite Americana, when I cite what I wanted to see with a tenth of with Han Solo. Again, essentially it was this: if you're going to take an iconic character that everybody knows, you do something like this, where you have these very important periods in their life that defines them, and you see it unfold. And again, it's how do you get an American Pie character like Richard Donner when he made this movie? The reason he took on this movie was that he was afraid after reading the script. Now, Mario Puzo, the guy who wrote The Godfather, wrote a script, and I believe there were some other people that might have touched the script at times. There was a lot of camp in the script that was intended to be taken out. There was a lot of camp in the script, a lot of campy stuff. The Telly Savalas had a cameo, a lot of trendy stuff of the 70s, hey, it's Kojak, stuff like that. And basically, Richard Donner says, no, we got to honor the character from the book. We can't just do a movie. Again, I've cited this with Spider-Man a couple times. There's a movie about a character, and then there's a movie where you adapt the character, and this is a movie where you adapt the character, where again, but specifically the character itself. And the mantra that Donner had in this movie was very similar to: we got to make it just we got to bring the character to life, and we did that in casting with Reeve, and of course Superman as the ideal, and an actor becoming the ideal because the portrayal was so strong. Many people said, get Downey Jr. as Iron Man, Christopher Reeve as Superman, the characters who. They became so enamored with their character, they kind of became them in real life. Downey Jr. could buy France if he wanted to.
God.
And Christopher Reeve, of course, he embodied everything that Superman stands for in every sense of the word. And the John Williams score, again, these elements that bolster when we think Superman, you either think Reeve or you think of that music.
That's got to be a top 5 John Williams score. And John Williams obviously has a super impressive catalog, but that's among the best of the best. That's just the 2 main themes, the da 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 da, and then the da 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 da. Yeah. I'm not doing the themes good, Dragon. It's late. I'm sorry, but you know what I'm talking about. There's the 2 main ones.
Absolutely, and again with that Williams score, they started the tradition of you say dun, 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 Superman, yes, it's Superman. Within the music, and there was a tradition that many of the other Superman adaptations that we've had have kind of tried to do that. They've replicated, like saying even the animated series is Superman, Superman. Exactly, that's how it works because of Williams. So I guess like over to streamline a bit here. I guess overall, again, the movie is sold on Superman, but at the same time, you have like the wonder of Krypton. You have kind of the a kid with powers. Again, each of these could be a movie in its own right, and we've kind of seen nowadays with the Krypton show. It's like they're trying to make a movie out of each. We've had Smallville and we've had Krypton, so we've literally made a movie, everything but a Superman TV show, essentially. Yeah, but it's just this movie.
I mean, in a weird way, Act 3 could almost be Lois and Clark.
I guess if technically, yeah, you're right. That way, I think you're right. Yes, technically, you're right. I guess we have kind of a show reflective of each act of this movie, technically. So, at the end of the day, the movie being sold in Superman, it's a Superman who's friendly. He's a friendly and just Superman, saving people and the world. He's a guy who's just like Lex Luthor. He deserves his day in court. He trusts the marshals to do their job. He delivers them to a prison. I'm sure you guys are gonna give these men due process. Again, he's truth. This is the Superman that absolutely embodies truth, justice, in the American way.
And of course, one of the best taglines of any movie marketing campaign ever, with "You will believe a man can fly."
It's one of the finest quotes. And again, speaking of that, the movie's very quotable. So we have Richard Donner and the main writer who makes all of those taglines sing. By the way, it's Tom Mankiewicz. Tom Mankiewicz, who is the son of Herman Mankiewicz, the writer of Citizen Kane. Yeah, he and Donner are writing partners, and again, they're basically, he was like, they couldn't call him like the honest to goodness writer, so they made him like the chief creative consultant on the movie, like the consultant for the film. And again, he's like behind all the making the love story work, making the whole Lois and Clark of it all. That's what honestly less Lois and Clark, more kind of Superman and Lois, making that love story work. The whole Peter Pan flew with children, Lois. That's Mankiewicz's line, baby. That's Mankiewicz.
Oh man, that is just like a pickup line if I've ever heard one. God damn, that's some smooth talking, Clark.
That's what I'm saying, though. But again, the movie is, while it is this great 3-act structure, it boils down to a few themes. And I think one of the big themes is that love story between, again, you get sold in the chemistry between these two, and you buy that Superman would lose his mind if anything bad happened to Lois. Mm-hmm. And I think the other really strong theme of the movie is fatherhood. Fatherhood is a huge thing within this movie and the second movie, which will breach into the second movie a little bit here, because well, first I'll only start off by one of the big pivotal scenes for me, the scene between Clark and Smallville and Jonathan Kent, and we have the son. I don't know what it is, but you are here for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but it's not making touchdowns. And of course, the most haunting, beautiful idea of the movie is I have all these powers, and I couldn't even save him. Oh my God, that's good. That's who that's.
I mean, it's fucking the whole tornado scenario, right?
True. I gotta tell you, we'll get to it, man. Let's table that for Man of Steel, all right?
All right.
We'll get there. The point is, again, like if you ever need a line that says like, you can't tell any good stories of Superman, they've all been told. He's basically Superman has too many powers. He's overpowered. You can't write a character like that. That's the character. That's the cell line. He has all these powers and he can't stop people from dying. At the end of the day, there's certain things he can't control. His father, he died of a heart attack, and that's something that Superman can't solve. That's a problem that he can't solve. That's a lesson that Mankiewicz learned. The things that Superman can't solve, you keep it personal. That's when it works. You keep it like political. That's when things go south.
Right.
And with the father thing, the reason here's where we transition to the second movie is that. Specifically with the Donner cut, the big idea of fatherhood is, of course, we have Jonathan Kent, especially in the first movie. We also have the Brando stuff with Jor-El. And Jor-El wonderfully played, and the way we utilize Jor-El with the whole, one of the other great iconic lines in the movie, the son becomes the father and the father becomes the son. One of the most interesting ideas that in the Richard Donner cut you fully see come true, where I don't know if you were privy to this or not, but Richard Donner cut, the main reason to watch the Richard Donner cut is all of Brando's scenes were cut from the theatrical.
Yeah, I know.
The point is, it's this beautiful scene where Jor-El, like any father, it's the most relatable father-son story ever. Where Jor-El says, "Son, if you're listening to this, that means I've tried to warn you not to get rid of your powers, and I died for you once when on Krypton, and I will die for you again to give you your powers." Basically saying, he gives away the power that we communicate with each other in order to restore his powers, to undo the whole red sun effect. And again, literally the whole sun, red sun, yellow sun of all in the dialogue there. But specifically, it's this beautiful bit where they use the Krypton music, and Jor-El physically touches his son. It's kind of the God touching it's the portrait kind of come to life there, where he touches a desperate Clark who's been beaten down. He's realized, I'm a mortal man now. Like, am I Superman? He touches him, and he gives him the son literally. The father becomes his son and reactivating what made his son special. It's a beautiful. It's a beautiful little moment. And how do you feel about Superman 2?
You know what, Dragon? I gotta say, I've only seen it a couple times when I was younger, so I'm really not all that caught up with it. So I'm not a big fan of it, honestly. I feel like it's ambitious, but at the same time, it's much more jumbled than the original Superman is. It just kind of lacks that coherent 3-act structure. It's a lot more just kind of like gag, action scene, gag, action scene. You know what I mean? It's kind of like one of those like stuff happens kind of movies.
Exactly, and that's the unfortunate thing. I mean, I'm not going to get into like a whole diatribe about the whole Donner cut and how Donner was wronged and everything, because that's been done, that's been said, and again, it's all agreed upon. But I'm going to say this though, that it's a shame that we didn't get to see with the production issues that's Superman 2 suffered, because they shot them back to back, like we're doing now with Avengers and so many other films these days. We shoot things back to back. It was one of the first times when they're doing this film. When you do something back to back, it was unheard of, because again, basically Superman 1 and 2 were one giant movie originally, and they had to break it up into 2 parts. And basically it's a film that, because they were kind of at war with directors, you don't get exactly like a clear-cut view on each one. Basically it's like it's still at its core, it's a Richard Donner movie, but we have these odd tonally different choices made. And unfortunately with Donner stuff, it wasn't reshot like to its final. Even with the Donner cut, as great as the Donner cut is with these added scenes and kind of the lesser stuff toned down, it's still incomplete. We recycle the big, spin the world around ending, which is great. And again, probably would have played, honestly, kind of plays better in the second one. But again, they had to make certain compromises to get the first movie made. So it's like a big what if. It's a big cinematic what if of like, there's a good movie here, but the production quality is great, but just the story, something's a little off about the story, which again, ipso facto is why the first movie always is going to be the first go-to in people's minds, because we have Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. He's tearing up. He has all the best lines. He's hilarious. There's a Lex Luthor that I think the big lesson. This is going to bridge us into the Superman 3.
Okay.
Unless you got anything else you really want to say on 2.
I mean, I like Terrence Stamp, Neil before Zod and all that, but that's about it. And of course, the ridiculous cellophane S.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's all Lester. It's all Richard Lester. This dumb cellophane. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that was a mild inconvenience. What are you going to do about that?
I do love how the rogue Kryptonians, how General Zod, Ursa, Nan, how they are. We set them up in the first movie, and again they kind of pay off with the idea that he sent one of the way it should be seen. He sends one of the bombs up there and one of the missiles up there, and it frees them. So Superman saving the Earth unleashes the Kryptonian threat, and of course again that's all great. And I will say stuff like the planet Houston. That's pretty funny. That works. That's hysterical. Like kind of some seeing what would it be like if a fully grown Superman with these dangerous powers arrived on Earth as a full grown man versus like a baby who's indoctrinated in the styles of the Earth. So you get to see that with the Kryptonians, and it's 3-on-1, which is also interesting. And again with Zod, and as I'll bridge into the whole Lex Luthor of it all here. So Gene Hackman, of course, he kills as Lex Luthor, and it's Lex Luthor as a land developer. And of course, the thing to bear in mind, this is before businessman Lex existed. So this essentially gets us the businessman Lex Luthor. It's an enterprising Lex Luthor. who has Miss Tessmacher and Otis, and he's a smart guy. That's the point. We get a smart Luthor who's charismatic, he's entertaining, and we years later, of course, we keep building and building on the idea of like, I want a Lex Luthor who's as interesting as the Joker, but he's not crazy. And that's essentially what we get started here.
Yeah, that's kind of like a nut they can't really crack with Luthor, right?
Yeah, but again, it gets kind of that the seed gets planted for that here, where you want an entertaining Luthor makes you want to love what he's doing, even though he's a bad guy. And of course, we flirt with that all the time, and like with an anti-hero on television, it's like a Walter White type, where we have a character who's again he's ingenious and he's doing bad things, but it's so wonderful seeing him do these bad things. And with that, here's the balance it occurred to me with Superman 3 and 4, especially 3. So Richard Lester directed 3 from start to finish, and Lester has the comedic sensibilities. And that's not bad, but here's the problem. The big problem, I think, kills Superman 3 and Superman 4 is kind of dead on arrival in a lot of places, is that you should never force comedy with Superman. Comedy should come naturally. Like, Lex is clever, therefore he can be funny. Superman 3, we have all the slapstick, we have all the on-the-nose comedy there, which just feels unnatural. Richard Pryor's in the movie, and he's just playing a comedic character. Again, that's all. It feels like it's what Richard Donner wanted to prevent with the first 2 Superman movies. He doesn't want Superman to be campy like Batman in the 60s. He doesn't want to make fun of Superman. Superman is the straightest character in the movie. He's the guy who, he's taking it all in stride. He'll go with it the way, whatever crazy things in his face, but he will remain Superman. In this case, we're putting Superman in a slapstick, rough, almost like a 50s comedy almost.
The one thing I do like about Superman 3, though, is the fact that it's more straightforward. You know what I mean? It's almost the most straightforward of all the Superman movies, where it's just like, it's just kind of Superman getting himself into kind of a ridiculous slapsticky situation and then kind of having to get himself back out. And there's some cool Smallville stuff in there. I think the Smallville stuff, I think we can all agree on, is probably the high point of the movie. That, and then the fight with Superman versus Clark Kent.
Absolutely.
Those are the 2 big takeaways.
I mean, let's say this. I think Superman 3, it looks great. I want to give all points for credit which credit's due there. Again, Superman 3 is the big...
I feel like Superman 3 was kind of like the Spider-Man 3 of its day.
Honestly, yes. I would agree with you full-heartedly on that.
It's like, it's technically a really good-looking movie. It's got some high points to it.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously, like, the main guy's still there. But at the same time, and it made a lot of money. But at the same time... it's a step down. It's definitely a step down.
It is, and honestly, at the end of the day, if you kind of excised a lot of the Richard Pryor stuff and you made the green kryptonite into red kryptonite, the movie would be a lot better.
Yeah, Richard Pryor, and it's kind of a shame because I'm trying to think of a modern example of this, Dragon. Can you think of a modern example of a superhero movie that just got tanked by like a current comedian just coming in and stealing the show?
I know there has to be some example. I'm just trying to think of it too here. Okay, let me think.
Honestly, I'm kind of thinking maybe Kat Dennings in the first 2 Thor movies.
Yeah, but I don't know if I thought I went there too, Tiki, but I don't think it's a fair comparison. But I'll say it's the closest thing we got right now. But
yeah.
I'm sure there's a better example of it, folks. Where there's like I know, like I guess the Super Ex-Girlfriend is not a good example. It's not. We need like a film that could have been good, but then that one corrupting element. I don't know. So,
like, I feel like we're missing like a ladder, like a lower tier X-Men movie or something.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, anyway,
I mean, he's probably the best part of the movie, but at the same time, he doesn't really fit in all that well. What about Ryan Reynolds and Blade Trinity?
I don't know, I guess, because again, he's kind of, I guess it's a better comparison, yeah, where it's just, he's like, take him out of the movie, he's just kind of trendy, I guess. We're like, hey, we like Ryan Reynolds, and he could be Deadpool. It's like, let's give him a Deadpool movie, let's not get him into Blade, though. It's just these...
Right.
That looks like, I think it's the best we're going to do right now on that, folks. I mean, I can't quite...
Okay.
Anyway, I'm sure there are probably far better examples we're not thinking of, too, by the way. But
like, what about someone from the Amazing Spider-Man movies? Like,
well, I mean, I guess maybe Jamie Foxx's Elektra, maybe.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx is, well, I guess I think the thing with Jamie Foxx is that it feels like that character was literally like inspired by Richard Pryor in
It
Superman 4.
does. It really feels like that. And again, I gotta tell you, I hope this whole Spawn thing with Jamie Foxx. It sounds a lot more promising than yeah. Now you bring up, absolutely sounds like a Richard Pryor. Like, hey, I like Spider-Man. Can I be in it?
Right, right.
Again, it's like history repeating itself. But again, so again, the main thing is the Smallville stuff absolutely is great. And that's the Clark Kent stuff I want to know about, and that's interesting. And Lana Lang, and it's all like based in the comics. And we do have some fun gags. Like again, I think we get the most natural gags are in Smallville with Clark, where like he's dancing at a dance all funny, and like he's like Superman, this godlike figure in a really kind of helpless position as Clark Kent in his hometown. And like the bowling alley gag is pretty funny, where he's bowling, and again, this is comedy that comes natural from Superman, not forced comedy of like we got to do something funny, or like he rolls a strike by blowing on the ball to kind of make the kid look good at his birthday.
On the ball, Dragon.
I'm sorry.
He sneezes on the ball.
Yeah, like he sneezes on the ball. Yeah, it's like it blows it blows like a string, burst all the pins into like a billion pieces. It's great. And again, I don't know why they didn't do red kryptonite, because it would have made perfect sense. But I don't know. The point is like tobacco and the kryptonite's bizarre.
Oh God. Okay.
The points are 3 had a lot of missed opportunities, and they overemphasized the comedy. That's at the end of the day. But you're right. The whole like dark Superman thing is the most interesting stuff. Small than the dark Superman stuff.
Okay, 4 on the other hand. I think the best thing about 4 is the fact that Christopher Reeves had good intentions with 4.
I absolutely agree with you with that. And by the way, Tiki, and you're going to love this, but you didn't need this for any research or anything. I'm going to tell you this, though. There's a documentary on Netflix. I can't recommend to you any more highly. If you want the story of why Superman 4 tanked, you got to watch this.
All right.
It's called Electric Boogaloo, the story of Canon Films. It's about, so again, the studio that made, honestly, Superman 4 was kind of the punchline to Canon Films. I believe that was the one right before the end for him. The one it was like the biggest film they made. And Canon Films is historically they're the cheapest studio alive, yet they made like the Death Wish sequel, and then they did like some ridiculous, like the He-Man movie. Remember the He-Man movie?
Oh yeah, Masters of the Universe, of course.
That was them, and that's the thing. You get to see them kind of luck their way into kind of hanging on, and they're the cheapest studio alive. And then they were given Superman. They almost made a Spider-Man movie. They did all this. So the Canon Films was a deeply flawed studio. Again, they were like kind of the B movies were just like the most insane B movie stories ever. Would basically be what Canon Films. So again, Electric Boogaloo, the story of Canon Films. I think it's what it's called. The Electric Boogaloo, at the very least, folks. Look into it. So yeah, support Christopher Reeve. He had the best of intentions, but Canon, again, being the cheap studio that it is, they really undercut a lot of the good intentions.
Yeah, I really do feel like Superman 4, just like all the problems in the movie kind of stem from budget in a lot of ways. Like just the ridiculous, overused, recycled shot of Superman flying towards the Earth.
Yeah, and here's what I think a lot of it is, Tiki. I think a lot of it is thematically with the idea. So again, Superman, ridding the world of nuclear weapons. And, I always love the fact that Tom Mankiewicz warned Christopher Reeve not to do that. And the fact that Christopher Reeve respected Tom Mankiewicz and Richard Donner and the making of those first 2 movies so much that he asked for his advice. Like, you made Superman really pop. Here's the idea I'm flirting with. What do you think of it? And he respectfully disagreed. And I don't think it was a mistake necessarily for him to go with this plot. I think this plot could have worked, honestly. It's an interesting idea, but again, you need writing, you need effects to really support this. And I think the way it went, I think Reeve had the idea, and then just kind of the writers. I believe these were Canon writers, by the way. I'm pretty sure they were at least a lot of drafts were written by some Canon. They all had pickups by the Canon writers. So I think if Reeves wrote it, I think he might have had a better shot. I don't know how involved he was in the writing process. That's a thing, and of course, with every budgetary constraint, you have to change the script. I would imagine that would be a big issue as well. So, it's it's a hard story to break, but not an impossible story to break. But at the end of the day, it's like, Superman, he can't save everybody. He can't solve every problem. And it's a good thing for Superman to realize, and on a global scale, when he kind of painted himself into a corner, I'm going to rid the world of nuclear weapons. I think the smarter story, and I don't want to just rewrite the thing here, but honestly, there's not a lot of writing in the first place on this. I just think that
like I said, Dragon, it's mostly just a lot of shots at Superman flying towards the Earth. That's really kind of like the bulk percentage of the whole movie is just like recycled shots and cheesy music.
I mean, honestly, the best they kind of gets is like, hey, we have a fight on the moon. That's about it.
Ooh.
But yeah, I mean, I think the smarter way to approach the story, I guess, would be, like Superman. We show the human-sized Superman where, he is a super being with powers, but he realizes, I can't solve the world's problems, and the world kind of turns on him a little bit, saying, hey, you took a big leap here, and now we have no deterrence, and now you're basically like, hey, Superman, good news, you're now our only deterrent in the world, and he has to deal with that. That to me sounds like an interesting story, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. So let's see. Here's a few interesting things that, again, with something like All-Star Superman, we have Luthor having a nephew, which in the comics it's a niece. Here it's a nephew. We gave him the ridiculous nephew.
God.
Here's what does work for me, though. I mean, I love, if I had to pick one element of Superman 4 I really do like, I do like the Superman. A lot of people kind of like make fun of it. I really like it. I love Superman Clark Kent kind of having the comedy of like doing the double date with God, I'm blanking on her name. I'm sorry. I think it's she's like a real like a Lou something. The point is like the girl, the new girl who runs the paper. Essentially, she's the daughter of the guy who bought the Daily Planet. Clark and Superman having this double date with Lois and her, and it's really well shot. I gotta give them that. They kind of shoot it well, where it's like we kind of have all these ingenious cuts of like of Superman and Clark kind of being at the same place but never at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's an embarrassing final note for Reeves' Superman, which is unfortunate because again the fact.
Yeah.
I mean, he came back and just seeing Superman like approach the UN is a really good shot. So I guess, Tika, we should probably talk about the other Reeves of it all here. So we should transition. We got to talk about what happened.
Yeah, sure. I kind of want to keep this brief because everyone sort of knows the story, but just kind of, I feel like Reeves' story is like it really is indicative of the symbolism of the Superman character. You know what I mean? It really does kind of come full circle. Like it's kind of art imitating life in a lot of ways, and it's just kind of it's a tragedy, but at the same time, what happened to him, he was almost kind of like a Christ figure in his own right. You know what I mean? Like that was his cross to bear to inspire other people.
Yeah, and so this was the whole the thing that really struck me. I remember I got some of the so Christopher Reeve he had the Christopher Reeve Foundation, which I bought the little donation to the Reeve Foundation. Like, it's kind of like minor. Basically, I got the dog tags from the like little dog tag and a little keychain thing where it says it's the Superman logo, and on the flip side it says "Go Forward," which I always found that very inspiring. As in, again, when we got to Luke Cage, I think I might have cited this once, where the whole "Go Forward" kind of campaign. There's something powerful about that. That Christopher Reeve's legacy is so inspiring that that man, he ascended to becoming Superman, not just in his acting ability, but he transcended. He was, again, being a guy who played, again, it took kind of the typecasting tragedy, but it ascended it to a whole nother level where, again, it's not typecasting. It's like being stuck stuck in a way of life that you're not thrilled with, yet being known for being one of the best characters ever created. It's like everyone knows you of being this really strong, this physically strong person, yet physically you were quite the opposite. But again, in regards to his character, he still showed the strength of character as Superman, and there was always something so aspiring about that, and the fact that again, he kept going forward. He just, like, in life, life's gonna knock you down. You gotta keep going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reminiscent of the Disney philosophy too. The whole keep moving forward. There's something really really aspiring about that. And again, like the fact that he kind of grew into. I remember there was this documentary I watched once. I think it's called Hope in Motion. It was about Christopher Reeve's rehabilitation, and in watching that, you got to see there were some hopeful periods where his fingers were starting to move, and that he was a guy, he cut to the actual research, the honest goodness research of guys, we gotta. Why aren't you doing this form of medical research? Let's just not do the bells and whistles. He had a goal to walk again, but then he had a goal of what, let's live with it. Let's show that we can still, life doesn't end in a chair. And again, it's a Superman. That's a heroic feat that only Superman could make happen.
Yeah, and like I said, it was one of those things where it's like he kind of through a terrible situation, he was able to take that and sort of I imagine for the paraplegic community especially, it was just like super motivational. You know what I mean? Like motivational in a way that you and I cannot even fathom.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Reeve, he even did work after his accident, not just in the Christopher Reeve Foundation, but I mean in regards of he did a couple movies. He did there was the remake of Rear Window, and
Wait, are you talking about Disturbia?
No, at Rear Window, there was a remake where he played the Jimmy Stewart character.
Okay, never mind.
And
that's clever casting for him, I must say.
That's the thing. They made instead of the wheelchair was like a paralysis from the full body paralysis instead of just like a temporary. It wasn't like a temporary broken leg in Rear Window.
Nice. I'm gonna have to check that out. Actually, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I've been meaning to rewatch it. I think it might be. I might have access to it. I'm not sure. But the point is, and also he did an animated film. The last thing he did was
Everyone's Hero.
Yeah, he co-directed Everyone's Hero. Yeah. So again, the fact that
it goes back to like the baseball and apple pie of the Superman character in a way.
It did, and also something that was kind of touching is that Robin Williams was in that movie, and of course in real life they trained. They were Juilliard trained actors together, and also fun fact: Kevin Conroy was also he went to school in Christopher Reeve. They weren't in the same dorm like he and Robin Williams were, but they were on the same campus at the same time. And it's kind of a little charming thing, but yeah, the fact that. Like Robin Williams would call after the initial paralysis. Robin Williams visit him and cheered him up, and something that really affected the both of them. Like Robin Williams masked some sadness from like his friend being in this helpless position, but at the same time, he kind of cheered him up in spite of himself. So again, it's just like it's the Superman effect of like things you're on your worst day in life, and there's that little feeling. There's that little feeling that. When you're at your worst, something you're gonna have a pick me up, and whether it's like you're falling out of a building and Superman like swoops in and he saves you, or in this case, like, it's kind of metaphorically what happens here. Robin Williams shows up when you're like, I can't walk anymore. Robin Williams shows up and he's making proctology jokes.
Right.
Yeah, so it's the effect. It's not just the Superman effect. It's also kind of the Christopher Reeve effect of how you embody that character. So again, we can keep going about Christopher Reeve. Let's transition to what follows the Superman films.
All right, we get the Superboy TV series, and Dragon. Let's kind of do like the next couple beats as lightning round before we get into the DC animated universe stuff, because I feel like it's. It's kind of a nice transitioning point, but it's a little bit of a stepping stone in terms of the Man of Steel's overall legacy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a lot of the live action TV stuff. There's not. We haven't quite cracked the code in the live action TV Superman. But Superboy, Superboy was an interesting case where I learned about Superboy. Honestly, I think I had heard about Superboy through the documentary. There were a few documentaries, but I think for the main one was probably the amazing Look Up in the Sky, the amazing story of Superman. And then I looked into it. Oliver Harper, basically kind of the Superman aficionado on YouTube, an excellent reviewer. I really learned about Superboy through that, and I was so inclined, I was so impressed by the show, so intrigued by the show, more accurately. I bought all 4 seasons of the DVD, and I watched through them. And so this series was made like a year after Superman 4, and the reason that this show got made is because there was like a weird copyright. There's a weird copyright gray area because famously Siegel and Schuster, they battled for copyright. Like they created Superboy, and that was like the only way they were getting money for a few years. because they didn't have copyright on Superman, and they spent years and years in courts. It's a harrowing story. We don't have time for it. Just trust me. It's a harrowing story about how they got the rights back for Superman eventually. But that's the thing. Superboy was in that gray area where the Sulkinds, they were working on Supergirl, and they essentially sold the rights to Canon. And then eventually John Peters buys the rights in the 90s. Of course, we saw how that turned out.
Oh yeah.
The streamlined Superboy is kind of like in the a what if it was set outside of the continuity of the Reeve films. It's just like, what if we did the comics and that he was Superboy before he grew up into the Superman role, and legally they can't call him Superman, so that's how you make a Superman show while not doing Superman show.
And that's really the interesting thing about this show for me, Dragon. And honestly, Dragon, the one episode I really want to check out is the Gilbert Gottfried episodes.
Yeah,
I'm definitely I don't think I'd marathon the whole series or anything, but definitely the Gilbert Gottfried episodes.
There's one better I can do for you. One of the episodes I recommended, Tiki. Gilbert Gottfried plays Mixie Spitalik.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one you got to watch, and Paul Dini wrote it.
But anyways, what I was saying is, I do think the Superboy TV show has an interesting kind of evolution to it, where it's definitely not it's definitely not like an ongoing story or anything, but at the same time, we do kind of get that. It's almost kind of like a condensed version of what we eventually get with Smallville, where by the end of it, he very clearly is in the Superman mold.
Yeah. Overall in Superboy, just kind of simplify it here, is that interestingly, Superboy, each season is different than the last, and I think that's quite fascinating. That for me, I think the show should have remained what the first season was, because the first season they had two actors that played Superboy. The first one, who only lasted a season, was my favorite, and that was John Haymes Newton, and he's Rob Pratt, the animator. He used him as the voice of Superman, so eventually he was able to play Superman in animation years later, which is kind of cute. And so again, John Haymes Newton, I loved him most because the first season is what a Superboy show should have been, and that he was a university student, and they shot in Orlando, Florida, by the way, which is kind of neat.
Nice.
And he was it was Schuster University, named after Joe Shuster. And but the idea is we'd have Lana Lang, how he met Lana Lang, and Perry White's nephew, so we understand how he worked at the Daily Planet. So he was friends with his son, Perry White's son, T.J. White. That's how he met him. It was kind of neat. So it basically had kind of a makeshift Jimmy Olsen that was connected to Perry White, and essentially the concept was it was Clark Kent figuring out kind of the bumbling Clark. It was before the bumbling Clark Kent, so we got to see him just kind of figuring things out, as a superhero and as a teen. So he wasn't bumbling at all. He was like the George Reeves Superman. It was like a young version of the George Reeves Superman. It was just kind of he was a journalist. He was a young journalist student in a college who fouled up Lex Luthor, who again went to school at Superboy. We do the whole hair loss episode, just like the comics. We do a lot of deep cut stuff in the Superboy comics. So that's the show I was really interested in.
Cool.
Then as the seasons kind of progressed, we get a new Superman actor in Gerard Christopher, and I think he was a better Superman. Haymes was a great Clark Kent. He was an unconventional.
But I think your point, though, I think it's really interesting, the fact that the Superboy thing is an even harder concept to really grasp down, and it sounds like, for the most part, season one got a good grasp on it, and if they would have kind of kept to that, it maybe would have evolved into a really, really good show. But while the other seasons were interesting in their own way, it never kind of got to that sort of Americana level again.
Exactly, because what it did, we kind of do what we do with Gotham now, where we kind of did a Batman show without a Batman. In this case, it kind of became, they want to do all this stuff with Superman, but we can't call him Superman. So he's basically, Gerard Christopher is playing Superman, but again, he's much older than a boy, so it's he doesn't look as young as the other guy. So it's okay, well, essentially he's Superman. We just keep calling him boy for some reason, and we get all the iconic villains again, like the George Reeves show. The first scene's it's guys in suits and Lex Luthor. It's about it. Here we get Metallo and Bizarro, and of course, Bizarro Superman is always cool. By the way, it's rarely will you ever find a Bizarro Superman that is not Is not interesting. And Bizarre Superman was like right off the page, like he was a duplication ray and everything. He was like, yeah, that's awesome. Basically, the main thing I'm going to hit here, and this will get us through all Superboy, is that Sherman Howard, he played Lex Luthor. They changed up the actor, get like an older Lex Luthor to go up against an old Superman, an older Superboy. And Sherman Howard, here's the thing. I was really excited going into the show because I knew Sherman Howard from Batman Beyond. He plays like a Lex Luthor type bad guy. He was like Terry McGinnis's archenemy. He's the guy who killed his father.
Oh, okay.
And he basically plays like a really cool, intimidating Lex Luthor in that show. And the fact that he did this before that's why he auditioned for Lex Luthor in the animated series, because he played Lex Luthor in this show.
Right.
And the problem is watching this is that he played basically the way Jesse Eisenberg plays Luthor. He plays like a really crazy, overzealous. Like he's crazy in a like only like the Silver Age of comics could do this crazy Luthor. He's crazy mad scientist Luthor, who's like late 80s Luthor. Yeah.
Oh.
I'll say this: like season 3 is the best season. They did they predated the X-Files, like a bureau where Clark worked. The episode that I think you saw a tease of, Tiki, is the best episode. If you can watch one episode of Superboy, watch Mind Games. That's where he and Luthor are trapped and they kind of talk about things like in a mine for the whole episode. And so that's really good. And season 4 is just kind of like we kind of a mix, kind of a mix of 2 and 3. 2 is crazy, 3 is good. 4 is just wrapping up some loose ends, doing some extra comic stuff, and just kind of like some what if stories. All right. So again, Superboy just kind of it was popular, and this is our transition point here. It was popular, and again wasn't really intended to get canceled. Again, it could have gone on if it wanted to. They wanted to do like a big TV movie, but it was supplanted by essentially the trends in the comic and the rights issue. And the courts, again, because they were talking about doing the Superman movie, they were talking about doing the John Peters Superman movie in the 90s. And basically there were talk of Superman in film.
Those giant mechanical spiders and the hiding behind the rocks dragon.
Basically, Superman was kind of on the radar again, where it hadn't been with all of like the 4 seasons of Superboy for like roughly 4 years. Like no one was really like worried about Superman. They wanted to kind of DC Warner Brothers. They wanted to kind of refresh the brand of Superman. Like let's get all of this boy stuff. Let's do man, and we get Lois and Clark essentially.
Yes, and we covered this show briefly. We covered the Mixie Spittlix episode with Howie Mandel during July.
Which I really like, by the way. I rewatched that episode. I still love that one.
And that's the only episode I've ever seen of the show, but my big attachment to this show is Terry Hatcher, who very much reminds me of my mom, both in mannerisms, and my mom's name is Terry, and mostly her Desperate Housewives character reminds me of my mom, but I don't know. I always have a soft spot for Terry Hatcher.
I gotta tell you, that's fascinating. I never knew that.
What?
I never knew the Terry Hatcher kind of comparison.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it during Christmas in July. I could be wrong, but
I don't think you did. I think the first.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, so Lois and Clark's. I'm with you too, T. I don't really have a huge familiarity with this show. Mainly the episode that we did, and I've done some research on it. Again, here's the frustrating thing with Lois and Clark for me. So, Lois and Clark is an inspired choice that I'm supported this choice that we do a Superman show where we follow the relationship of Lois and Clark. That's good, opposed to Superman and Lois Lane. Again, that's more interesting. That's a show I can get behind in premise.
This is gonna turn into the Simpsons meme. Like, that's good. That's bad. That's good. That's bad. Go ahead.
My point is that, so again, I love that idea that in concept, I think the show works wonders. It makes me really want to watch it. Again, I want to do what I did with Superboy. I want to kind of do a deep dive into it. Problem. Not counting Miximus, which you gotta remember, Miximus is like season 4, and that's where we're kind of they're reaching the goal of like getting them married off and everything. That's like kind of the big. It's basically when they have like all their ducks in a row. It's like, hey, here's the big sweeps week thing we've been planning. They're engaged, and at the end of the season they'll get married.
Right, right.
That's my understanding of it. Because again,
and that's their big epic arc of storytelling through the whole series.
Yeah, and again, that's the show had this mandate that was bizarre. So again, Miximus, I think honestly, I think we just struck it right on Miximus because that episode seems to be the show I want to watch. Problem is, what I understand, what I researched, what I could find, I looked in the clips of the episodes to kind of get a feel of the show, and here's the reason I don't think I'm going to be buying all the seasons, at least not anytime soon. It's the Superman 3 problem, where you have the romantic stuff is interesting. That's the romantic relationship stuff I want to see, but there's a comedy mandate. They do a lot of not sitcom choices, but they do a lot of over the top comedy choices.
Right.
Again, I don't understand why do we. You need that Donner influence.
Why does Superman must have slapstick, Dragon?
Again, it's really I can't even call it slapstick. It's just broad comedy of like they do these weird choices like Lex. I didn't know what I was looking at. Like Lex Luthor has seemingly jumped off of a ledge, and we know he's alive. And it's like a newspaper, like an old timey like spinning newspapers. It's like a gag headline about Lex Luthor having jumped.
Oh my god!
Off a building. And it's baffling. I mean, there are a few clever gags, like Superman's in prison, and this one prisoner guy is like teasing him, and he's punching him, and he wants to fight him, and Superman just cleverly steps out of the way, so he gets into a fight with a bigger prisoner guy. Like that's clever, but we just have a lot of forced comedy in the show. It's like they're trying to do a comedy series before they're doing the romance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's baffling to me. Overall, just with the Lois and Clark specifically, Dean Cain. I think Dean Cain's a great Clark Kent for this show. Yet he's not much of a Superman. I will say this though: I think it's a well-written Superman. I love all of Superman's dialogue. He sounds like he's written like a traditional Superman. Like in Miximus, that's a well-written Superman. I feel
like with Dean Cain, it's maybe a less extreme version of the Clooney problem, where Clooney is honest to God a fantastic Bruce Wayne, but a piss poor Superman, or a piss poor Batman, I should say.
I think that's a fair comparison. It's a fair comparison. Yeah, that's the thing. Again, he doesn't feel like Superman. It just feels like Dean Cain with slick back hair. It's
exactly. Much like how Clooney Batman just feels like Clooney.
Like Clooney at a costume party.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Let's see. Again, I will say this: I do like the choice. Again, folks, this is the closest thing we've gotten to a Superman show on television, where again he is Superman, he's in the costume and everything. We got Mom and Pa Kent, we got Lex, we got Perry White, we got Jimmy Olsen, we got them all there.
Right.
And of course, Terry Hatcher, she was a very popular Lois Lane. You remember she was the big sell line of the show. Everyone said for many years, she was the best Lois Lane outside of Margaret. Even some people even put her over Margot Kidder. Like she was the favorite Lois Lane. And I will say this, even in the comedy of it all, she did have a good dynamic with Dean Cain. I think that's what sold the show. They had great chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think the big one of the things that hurt the show. The last thing I got on is that they dragged out the show because of the death of Superman, because they killed Superman off and they had to bring him back and then marry him off, and that's why the show lasted 4 seasons, because they had so then they had to do a dance with the comics. And again, you don't have this with TV now, where you have to tie into the comics. Right? That's the thing. They didn't want to like, hey, marriage, and then he's dead. They wanted to, they have to earn the marriage, so they have to court each other for like 3 seasons. I mean,
okay, so let's move on to something that's much more culturally relevant now.
Real quick, and sure, yes, let's absolutely move on to is that in the comics now, what's so fascinating, this is the place where I would have loved to see in a Lois and Clark show, but they never had the guts to get to this fast enough. I want to see what we have in the comics now, where Lois and Clark, Superman and Lois, they have a son now. They have a son in the family. Those are the interesting questions I want to see answered with Superman without getting into a Superman Returns thing. It's like doing it in a compelling way. Like the relationship turned into Superman starting a family. That's the territory we haven't breached with Superman until like now in the comics. So speaking of like new territory with Superman, like territory they kind of like got us into interesting places with Superman, DCAU.
Yeah, I gotta say, Dragon, I've always kind of like written off Superman the animated series. It's like, oh, okay, it's kind of just like the the redheaded stepchild to Batman the animated series. I gotta say, I'm rapidly changing my viewpoint on that. Because I'm appreciating more and more like the historical perspective of it's a modern update on Fleischer, where it's the Fleischer story, it's the Fleischer style mixed with modern day storytelling. And B, I mean, just in the 3 episodes that you had me watch, I'm really transfixed, especially with what I must assume is one of the best. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, this isn't. I'm sorry. I'm skipping ahead, but
Right. Well, let me tell you the folks for the folks on there. I showed Tiki 3 of what I thought are some of the best episodes of Superman the Animated Series. I showed him at least 3 of my favorites. I showed him The Way of All Flesh. I think that's what it's called, The Way of All Flesh, the Metallo episode, the first Metallo episode, which
that was a really interesting kind of sci-fi story about the idea of like, you know, like replacing body parts and what that would do to you, and you know, like kind of the whole Darth Vader dilemma, you know, like he's more machine now than man. You know what I mean?
It was a good Lex Luthor episode too, seeing like Lex pull the strings, and again, that's a far better Metallo than you get in like Superboy. And of course, I think if I ever had to pick one episode of Superman the Animated Series, I think if not Metallo, then I'd pick the Bizarro Superman episode.
That was fantastic. That was easily my favorite of the 3 animated series episodes.
And you know why that was so great? That was written by the guy, one of the guys who wrote Perchance the Dream.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, man, I can't get enough. And that was Tim Daly who did the voice of Bizarro Superman, by the way. So that's him.
And the great thing about that episode is that it did have that sense of like levity to it, and kind of like I love the arc of Bizarro in that episode, kind of like, you know, taking on the mantle of the Superman ideals by the end of the episode. You know what I mean? It's fantastic storytelling.
Honestly, again, the bit that always gets me on watching that episode is it's ostensibly it's kind of funny, but I mean, I'm so wrapped up in it, I don't care. It's like, oh my god, it's so beautiful. Where Bizarro, he kind of saves the day at the end, and Lois says something along the lines that she's like says she accepts Bizarro and like says you're a hero. You are a hero, and you see this again. It's kind of a beautifully sad image where Bizarro, this jacked up looking Superman, he gives this hopeful smile of like, yeah, as he's saving the day. And again, it's almost like a frowning clown image in an interesting way, where, you know, he's giving that smile like, you know, I feel so good for Bizarro, and it's such a heroic thing that he's doing right here, sacrificing himself here. And again, it's a beautiful little self-contained story about Bizarro Superman. It's beautiful. And of course, the other one, speaking of self-contained stories, was the late Mr. Kent.
Oh yeah. And that one was definitely that kind of reminded me of Batman the Animated Series more than any of the other ones, just because of kind of, like you said, the self-contained quality to it. It almost had kind of like that detective noir vibe to it a little bit.
Honestly, that episode feels like if the George Reeves show had smarter writers, I think we could have gotten that there.
I could see that.
So speaking of which, so overall with the Superman the Animated Series, and then bridging into kind of generally with the Justice League and such. So of course, you know, we get the Batman the Animated Series, which of course leads to this in '96. And overall, Superman the Animated Series, it's very well written and to a Fleischer level. The way Fleischer looked, I think this one's written to the Fleischer. Again, the way the Fleischer.
Really love how they emphasize the storytelling there, because storytelling in Superman is not one of those things that traditionally goes together super well.
I mean, Tiki, you're not wrong in that this show really is. It's underrated. It's undervalued, underrated, and that people, again, they always go to Justice League.
I'm really starting to get that vibe based on the 3 episodes you showed me.
And again, it's a great series too. I'd recommend it, and you could binge this, and you'd have a great time with it. I would bet you. And again, we do need this to get the Justice League, because this was the big crossover. We had a few crossovers with members of the Justice League in the show. Again, Batman being a big one, of course, with the world's finest of it all. We had Flash, we got World's Finest, we got Aquaman. Those are the big 3. Even Green Lantern, actually. Now I'm thinking about it. We got a number of them. They're seated in Superman the Animated Series, and. So again, it has that basically. If this and the Fleischer Superman show, serials from years ago were married, they would have been like the most beautiful, glorious animation baby of Superman ever. The highest Fleischer level quality of writing is what you have here. Again, Fleischer, and it's the way Fleischer looked. This one's written like.
Sure.
It again, this is the show that really, honestly, this is the show that brings Batman the Animated Series to the DC. the DC universe, with Justice League and et cetera. How do you feel about Tim Daly's Superman?
I really like him. I don't want to say he's as iconic as Kevin Conroy, but I feel like he's a good match in terms of kind of being the Kevin Conroy-esque performance. I like how he's lighter than Conroy.
Yeah, he's a great juxtaposition opposite of Conroy's, where I always felt it kind of reminded me, especially with that late Mr. Kent episode I showed you. It feels like Tim Daly's Clark Kent feels like it's not directly George Reeves, but it feels like he is a reporter, and the running gag in the show was that they didn't want to just do like a whole romantic thing with. Here's the thing, they went about the Clark and Lois dynamic really interestingly, in that Clark and Lois were like, they were rivals, but they were friends. They were friends and rivals that they always like tried to outscoop the other one. Superman, and Clark, he didn't deal.
Things I kind of picked up on. I noticed that they had more of an emphasis on the Clark Kent reporter stuff. And honestly, Dragon, the cool thing about that is that it kind of mirrors the Batman detective stuff.
I know, yeah, that's the thing. It's so great. So when you see Clark Kent like reporting on things, you can see him like scouting out trouble, and again, like figuring things out.
You especially get that in the
late Mr. Kent.
Yeah, late Mr. Kent, exactly. Like we get like a whole montage of him doing detective work, which is really like I said, Dragon, definitely calls to mind the animated Batcave stuff we've been doing recently.
Certainly, and again, it's a very kind of a new spoke in the whole Clark and Lois dynamic, where they're rivals. And again, Clark's not necessarily, he's not being mild. He's a little less mild mannered. He's not bumbling at all. He'll bumble. The only time they've really had him bumble is when they introduced Kryptonite, which is one of my favorite episodes actually. That and Bizarre are probably my favorite episodes. It's called A Little Piece of Home, and has one of the best soundtracks you've ever heard with Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, again, while we have that balance of George Reeves with Clark Kent and like kind of a new Clark Kent, we have a kind of again with Tim Daly's kind of the lightness in his voice there and kind of the optimism. He's optimistic, in a very Christopher Reeve-like way. I felt, he's basically the just side of the Christopher Reeve performance, where again he's very just, he's very about like doing the right thing. I think that comes across with Tim Daly. He's just, and he's tenacious. Clark Kent is tenacious, his Superman is just. It's a really good combination. And the best thing I can say about Superman bridging into Justice League 2 here is that I think this shows the adaptable quality of Superman excellently.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you'll see in this show is that Superman, he's Superman.
Like in the documentary, they make a really good point of, if every theatrical movie had the same kind of sophisticated writing that this show did, Superman would be like a huge, like way bigger deal than he is now.
Yeah, I mean, Superman, he's a safe, static constant that you can throw anything at, and he'll roll with it. And the interesting thing about what you said too is that a lot of the Superman players are from the comics, and that's when they get it right. And Kevin Smith's been saying this for years when he's been talking about the whole Superman lives that never was. Where if they got Mike Carlin or Stan Berkowitz, these are the writers who you see like in the credits of the Superman the Animated Series, as well as even some of the older stuff like. Superboy had some well-written episodes. Again, like they were involved in the TV shows as much as they could be. Unfortunately, they never got the attention that the movies did.
Right.
So let's see. I'm trying to transition to Justice League here. So again, if Superman's he's adaptable, and we get to a seen-it-all type Superman. That's what we establish in the animated series, and of course, a seen-it-all Superman is that absolutely what we need for a Justice League show, where he will be faced with it all, with other superheroes, and of course with and of course just with bigger issues. It's like I felt that we have many eras of Superman in the Superman the Animated Series, and that's how we get that cool sci-fi design. We have a lot of great ideas and a lot of great takes that we fully grow in the Justice League Animated Series. Where, for example, we introduce Brainiac, and the big Brainiac idea that we always flirt with. Whenever anyone says let's do Brainiac, they're thinking of the Animated Series, because the Animated Series had the idea, the genius idea, Paul Dini idea. I'm pretty sure it's a Paul Dini idea. It might have been James Tucker of let's tie Brainiac into Krypton. He was the supercomputer on Krypton that told the Kryptonians, "Don't believe Jor-El. I'm the machine. I know the data." And he was secretly stealing all of Krypton's information and escaping before it blew up. He was just such a prick. And voiced by Corey Burton.
Yay!
And he was so good as too, like this mirthless robot. I love Clancy Brown's Lex Luthor. For me, he's the definitive Lex Luthor. Clancy Brown, Lex Luthor, in this show and in Justice League. He kept playing it for. They kept the DCAU Lex, and he was perfect.
Okay, so transitioning into Justice League then. Dragon, this is definitely a show. Like, god damn, the episode you showed me really rocked my world, Dragon.
That's just a tasty. That's just one.
All right, so you showed me. God damn it!
For the man who has everything.
Yes, thank you, Dragon. I don't know what it is with my memory tonight. The man who has everything, which is, for all intents and purposes, the Superman equivalent to Perchance to Dream.
Of course, adapting the story written by Alan Moore, which is excellent.
Mm-hmm. And Dragon, I don't really have a ton to say about the Justice League as a whole, but if it's anything like this, then I'm all for it.
So let me because now I don't think we need to say a whole lot about Justice League. Let me boil it down like this. So, did you get a chance to see that Dark Side clip that I sent you of the whole like world made of cardboard and the whole Superman giving his big speech to him?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a deal breaker. It's kind of a good moment for what I'm going for here. So again, let me put it this way: there's a huge connect that basically pays off in the Justice League series. So Darkseid. So Darkseid is the character we keep talking about. Like, oh, in that Justice League movie we're going to get Darkseid. It's going to be awesome. Again, basically the DC equivalent to Thanos is Darkseid. And if you go off the animated series or the comics, Darkseid is such a. Again, this is before Infinity War had come out. He would have thrashed Thanos. He's such a good character, easily. And Darkseid, what they did is they tied Superman into Darkseid here. Darkseid is he brings out the worst in Superman. He's he brings out an angry and dark Superman, and that's how you. And of course, now we just try to do that all the time with Superman. But this is like when there was like that one guy. If Lex Luthor is Superman's archenemy, Darkseid is the enemy that Superman hates most on this earth.
Oh man.
His Darkseid, he killed people Superman loved, and one of the big stories. So Tiki, season 3 of Superman is all Darkseid. Like he's the season 3 of Superman the animated series introduced Darkseid, which of course was a huge villain in the Justice League. And he essentially was like a running narrative. Like they built him up. Like he was like the one running thread through season 3, where Darkseid, it built to this point where Darkseid brainwashed Superman. And this is a huge idea for Justice League. I'm going somewhere with this. Where he created this lasting trauma for Superman where he brainwashed him and forced Superman to attack the planet. And because of this, the world in the animated series, especially when we get the Justice League Unlimited, they always wondered, what if Superman went rogue? This is where the idea came from. This is the whole, like, what do? We need contingencies for Superman. If he goes rogue again, he could rule the planet like he almost did that one time. And the Justice League animated series, the first season of Superman, he was really underpowered, and that was a big problem. Like, he kept getting knocked out left and right. It's like, come on, he's Superman, for Christ's sake. Come on, he can't just get knocked out by electricity. Who's writing? Who wrote this? Like, they had to keep underpowering him. It was an issue. Then season 2, they continued the Darkseid thing. Like, Darkseid gets reintroduced in Justice League season 2, where they have to fix Superman in a big way, and their solution to this was, okay, right out the gate, like the biggest criticism we got on Justice League was that Superman was underpowered. Like, he kept getting knocked out all the time. What we're going to do, we're going to show Superman going up against Darkseid, the big revenge episode. We're going to start Justice League season 2 off with Darkseid's back and Superman's upset by this. and so it's very fascinating. We made Superman really interesting in that he had to deal with that. He had to deal with a character that he truly hated. Batman had to rein him in, and he never forgave Batman for not letting him finish off Darkseid. It was like a lot of really interesting stuff when they did their homage to the death of Superman with this story called Hereafter. So you got a lot of interesting, like, Superman got like 2 honest to goodness like arcs in that season. Then we get the JLU, which is about the bigger, and this is where I'm going with all this here. So we get the bigger moral gray question of Superman. So writing wise, that's where we get the whole man who was everything type stuff with Superman. This is where you watch, Tiki. Justice League Unlimited asks the big moral questions of Superman, like, how far is too far? And the big threat of the big kind of gun looming over everybody's head was in a literal sense of, does the Justice League have too much power? Superman was predicted in another like, you know, one of the Infinite Earths. In one of the Infinite Earths, Superman killed a Lex Luthor who became president. And the government finds out, Amanda Waller finds out about this. And she raises the big ethical questions. Well, if in a world where Superman can kill the president, we should be prepared for that, shouldn't we? So we get a lot of hints of what we do with Superman now. The whole hints of injustice and like that. The whole nightmare version of Superman and the Zack Snyder stuff. So all of this comes.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I take it it's like a more sophisticated version of what we eventually get with Snyder.
Exactly, because that's what we get. That's the big takeaway from Justice League and all the DC. The DCAU put forward all the great ideas that we try to attempt at in the DCEU. All right.
But I guess just to speak to the DCAU as a whole and why I like it so much, Jake, and I think why a lot of people like it so much, is that it's just this great mix of artistry, sophisticated storytelling, and lightness and levity. And I think that's something that is missing. And it's like, you know what I mean? Where it's like we need to have all three of those things. We need to have sophistication and levity. And I feel like the DCAU does both better than almost anyone else when it comes to at least TV animation.
Right. So going from TV animation to TV and live action.
Smallville, early 2000s.
You take point on this one.
Oh, God, Dragon, I don't fucking know. I remember my sister and I would watch this from time to time. I think my sister had a crush on Tom Welling. I don't know.
All right. Okay, I'll keep it simple. It's not a lot of people. I won't spend a lot of time. Look, nothing against Smallville, but let's just say Smallville's complicated.
Gotham, it ain't. Like, Gotham is like the blue meth version of Smallville.
Again,
and Gotham isn't a perfect show by any means.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm saying comparatively to Smallville. So, look, folks, I'm going to keep it simple. So, Smallville, of course, it's a prequel series about the Kents raising Clark. That's the cell line. That's the genesis, at least what the show was started off being. And again, that's kind of what we kind of flirt with Gotham and everything, with like seeing Bruce Wayne go from Bruce to Batman. Of course, Smallville famously had the whole no tights, no flights philosophy. Basically, their gimmick was no tights, no flights, as in he's Clark Kent, but we'll hint at Superman, but we're going to drag it out. And we had Crypto-Freaks.
I don't get why that was a sell point back in the day. That just baffles me.
I mean, I'm saying they really sold that whole no tights, no flights. I'm saying that was the whole, like, that he's, where he's going, but you're going to earn it. That's the thing. They kind of the whole earn it kind of. I think that's what they were saying. So they basically had two cell lines. So you had that, and you had the Crypto-Freaks. The Crypto-Freaks were that. So Smallville, of course, again, tying into the Richard Donner of it all, we get all the Smallville stuff, of course, which was very interesting and touched on the Donner films. Like, what if we expanded that into a TV show? Essentially, that's Smallville.
Mm-hmm.
And we take some ideas from classic Superboy comics, but again, he would never don the costume of Superboy. Again, be directly like Donner, where he one of these days he'll go to the Arctic and he'll become Superman. We thought. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think the most interesting thing about Smallville is probably the Luthor dynamic, if I'm being honest.
And you're absolutely right, T. That's the
real. Dragon. By the way, have you heard about the recent, shall we say, controversy with Smallville?
Yes, with Chloe.
Yes. Oh my God.
It's funny. I always liked Chloe too. It's the sad.
But it's the same, like, talk about a situation where, like, I feel like that's kind of like the Superman curse, like, retroactively hitting the show like years later.
Yeah, you thought you got away from it, did you? Okay, but let's not spend a lot of time on that.
No, of course not. Yeah.
Okay, the fact of the matter is, again, Michael Rosenbaum, who's a great actor, and I love this guy to pieces. He killed it on Smallville. He's of course I knew him because he voiced the Flash in the DCAU. He's a great Flash in the DCAU. And Michael Rosenbaum, he plays a very compelling Lex Luthor, and basically we show the relationship between Clark and Lex, and of course knowing that's going to go south, which is that to me was the big sell point of Smallville.
That is the sell thing for me, Dragon. I remember when I did tune into the show, that was the thing I was mostly watching for.
Yeah. And of course, just like with the
press, one thing with Smallville is the Christopher Reeves cameo is a big moment in Superman history.
Like for me, if I ever had to pick one episode of Smallville, that's the one. The Doctor
of course, naturally.
Dr. Swan episode. And essentially, that the significance of that episode, by the way, that's the big episode in season 2 where the first season he finds out he's from another world. Season 2 is he learns about that other world. He learns about Krypton, and Christopher Reeve basically serves the Jor-El role, where he translates the Kryptonian to tell him what Jor-El said to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's significance. That's a great passing of the torch episode. And Christopher Reeve, there's that great mystical quality of Christopher Reeve in that episode. It's just like you can sense, you can feel the importance through your TV screen. That's like
exactly, yeah.
And of course, it's just the brief like kind of bullet point here. Like, yeah, there are a lot of ridiculous decisions made. Small, we don't have time to go over all of them. All I'm going to say is the biggest one was the whole Jimmy Olsen thing, where Jimmy Olsen had a brother who, like, hey, we killed Jimmy Olsen. Isn't that bold? And yet we have another identical Jimmy Olsen who's like the younger brother of the other Jimmy Olsen.
Oh man, what is up with DC just like shamelessly killing Jimmy Olsen?
To be fair, at least we still got a Jimmy Olsen through this one. All right, to be fair. That's the thing. At the end, like, here's what I'm saying. So here's what I'm going to round up all the Smallville stuff here. So, in Crypto Freaks aside, are basically, hey, we did too much kryptonite on Smallville. Smallville is an example of too much kryptonite.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the things you had too much kryptonite. You had a lot of C. I mean, nowadays it's CW, but then it was the WB before they turned into CW.
Yeah.
The point is, they had a lot of, I guess,
Frog.
I know, I remember, the old Michigan J. So the point is, the whole, like, what was WB then, which is now feels very CW, and that's the shorthand I'm familiar with now. It's like, it felt like there's a lot of CW cheese. There's a lot of whole, like, the loft, we got to go with the loft, Lana. We got to have, like, our moody, like, walking away angry stuff, like, all that. That's the whole, all the cliches, like, all the CW, like, teen heartthrobbing cliches. I'll say this again. There's my last point here with the Smallville. So basically it's a 3, as we would echo on Gotham. This is like a 3 to 5 season premise. Specifically with Smallville, it's like a 3 to 5 season premise.
And that's why I'm so happy that Gotham is ending at season 5 with a shortened season. I'm just like, yes, that's exactly what the show needs.
For me, with Smallville, it's always been, it's a 3 to 5 season premise that kept going and going and going until it reached the 10th season mark. And basically,
I feel like the modern day equivalent to Smallville is definitely The Walking Dead.
Sounds about right. But here's the thing. Here's what Walking Dead has to get right, though. Here's my point. So it's a 3 to 5 season premise that kept going and going and going, basically dragged until the big payoff. There was a payoff, and this is the great part of Smallville. The last 3 minutes, times out the 3 minutes, it all paid off. Basically, I watched the show just for 3 minutes. That's essentially what I did. I watched the entire show.
Oh, you poor soul.
Okay, no, to be fair, let me rephrase that. No, I haven't watched. I wasn't in the Smallville at that point. I mean, I watched the early seasons. The point is, I would watch or flirt with watching all of it. To get to that, I watched the last episode, so I can get to that 3 minutes. I want to make it clear, I didn't endure all of Smallville. I'm not that brave.
Okay.
But I'm saying those last 3 minutes, those last 3 minutes were sheer TV magic. Like, oh my God, and seeing Tom Welling. For some reason, he was afraid of putting on the suit. I don't know why, but when he tore open the shirt and he was Clark Kent at the Daily Planet, Great Caesars goes, everything clicked, Tiki. It was perfect. 3 minutes of perfection. Oh, so that's basically Smallville. It's a long way for 3 minutes. That's basically Smallville in a nutshell. Okay.
All right, so let's get to Superman Returns, which is an interesting kind of forgotten pop culture enigma these days, I feel like.
Yeah. If you want to take point on this one.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting watching that documentary again, Dragon, because of course that documentary was made for Superman Returns, so they're treating it as if Superman Returns is going to be like this big, like, cultural milestone event for Superman. Not so much.
Oh, by the way, if anyone's wondering, we're not really going to spend a lot of time on Superman Lives. We already did that with Death of Superman Lives, so.
Mm-hmm. Dragon, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I like Superman Returns. I really do. In some ways, I almost kind of like Superman Returns a little bit better than Superman 2.
You know what? I'll meet you with that to an extent. I don't think it's better than two. Bear in mind, when I say two, I always mean the Donner cut.
It's a more even story than two, and that's my thing. Like I said with two, my main problem with two is the fact that it's just kind of a stuff happens movie. And Superman Returns, it tells a ridiculous story about Superman being a father, sure, but it's still a complete story.
Well, let me say this. I'm going to meet you halfway here. Is that I like Returns more than most. I like a lot of elements of it, but at the end of the day, there are definitely some problems with it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's the thing. I don't like a lot. I think I don't like what the consensus doesn't like, but by the same token, I would defend the stuff that works more in that movie than.
I would say Brandon Routh honestly makes a fantastic Superman, and I just think it's a shame what happened to Brandon Routh.
He is on a show now. He's on DC's Legends of Tomorrow.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's good. He
plays a very optimistic character. He plays basically it's a character kind of almost like a character trying to live up to Superman in a way. It's kind of strange.
Dragon, I love him in Scott Pilgrim.
Well, yeah, I like him in Legends of Tomorrow too. And Brandon Routh is a good actor, and that's the thing. You're absolutely right. He's a good. I thought he was good in the movie. The problem is the writing doesn't support him a lot in this.
I feel like that's kind of the problem with the whole movie. Is that the whole movie is kind of like a. I feel like it's a fest before Nostalgia Fest were really even a thing. You know what I mean? In a weird way, I feel like Superman Returns would be more successful nowadays in this like nostalgia obsessed culture that we live in.
I'll tell you this, like I'll say, 80 years into Superman, I would say now would be the time to pull a Superman Returns. Like only at a milestone could you get away with the nostalgia fest. I think you're looking for there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, honestly, so Superman Returns it was Bryan Singer's tribute to the Donner films, and again, which is admirable, and I like in places. And again, in casting Brandon Routh, like kind of you're going for someone cut from the Reeve cloth, kind of an unknown. He was very unknown at the time. It was a smart move, and again, I like kind of doing a movie in the Donner spirit. That's not bad. I love to see. Here's the thing that I live for in the movie. Here's why I rewatched the movie for. I rewatched the movie for the scenes where, of course, classically, I love Superman saving the plane. Which again is a classic. That again, it's in everything Superman. You see him land a plane in the animated series and Justice League, and he always, landing the plane again. Fleischer Superman. He catches the plane, and I live for the plane rescue and the car shot. And of course, the plane rescue is where we kick in the John Williams theme full blast. Like yes. And the car rescue where he's lifting the car over his head just like the first appearance, and that's fan service in an excellent way for me there. It's like, yes, okay, deep cuts that we haven't recognized on film yet. Nice. The big problem though in the movie, I think overall for me, the big problem is that Superman isn't proactive in the movie. That's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of like a Superman movie without Superman in a lot of weird ways. It's like Superman maybe has like 3 or 4 sizes of Superman movies.
I mean, it's like Superman isn't proactive, and they're too locked into the Donner films. Again, I respect where they're coming from, but they don't quite get like the Donner films. They had Superman doing things like he was stopping the Kryptonians. He took responsibility for stopping the Kryptonians, we saw him go around, helping people. He got cats out of trees. He stopped jewel thieves. He did all of this. And he's doing stuff, and then here he's just kind of he's back, and that's an event, right? It's basically just it's the return trip. That's about it. We'll say this though: Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor, it was perfect casting. Unfortunately, didn't live up to his full potential. Again, I blame the writing on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Brandon Routh thing. I think we had perfect casting for Lex and Superman. Just again, Kevin Spacey was always flirted around for the role, and of course, when Superman Lives is being flirted around. Again, Kevin Spacey, again, from what we've seen, again, just speaking to him in an acting capacity. I want to make that clear. So in an acting capacity, Kevin Spacey, of course, House of Cards. He's a phenomenal actor. He can absolutely play Lex Luthor type, and he's a huge, longtime Superman fan, by the way. So again, I thought he was perfect for that role.
To say that, but we are getting to a point now with where we've been on that where my computer's kind of starting to stall a little bit, and I think this maybe happens sometimes when the podcasts go on for a little too long. So we really need to kind of get this to a place of wrapping it up as soon as we can.
All right. Okay, let's see. All right. Okay. So real quick, just let me bullet point this here. Okay. So again, here's what works. So again, the key idea of and questioning, can a world move on from Superman? That's not bad. I think Lex weaponizing the fortress and using the crystals to kind of form these kryptonite islands, not bad. But I think too tied into like a land deal. Like I don't know, there's some ideas they could have gone with there. So again. A lot of CG hurts this movie. The CG, the muted colors, a lot of this stuff. Again, aesthetically, we do a lot of stuff that hurts the movie, and I think that's like it could have been a really good movie. It could have been a nice tribute, but it needs an original story, and it drags a lot. So, Superman Returns, not a happy return, but an admirable one. Okay, so let me broad spectrum the DC originally animated films here. So Superman, well, again, Superman Returns kind of disappointed a lot of people in a way. The animated films were really the lifeblood of getting Superman in film. They really were. In that, we get a lot of Superman films that really, again, like in the absence of like big blockbuster Superman films, we had like a lot of really good intimate pieces about Superman. Like, again, we start off a little more cash grabby with like Superman Doomsday. Hey, let's do the death of Superman. It'll be awesome. We do other pieces like Dark Knight Returns featured a very accurate, really awesome, again, a Superman that improved upon the source material, really nice. And we're going to focus on kind of the main again, briefly, bear in mind, we're going to focus on the main Superman focused movies like All-Star Superman. So All-Star Superman, it faces the problem of...
This is probably the thing that I have the least to say, just because I'm like the least familiar with it. I watched it once back in the day, and I really should have rewatched it for this. But I guess the main thing I have to say about it is that it is very Grant Morrison on film, which I think is really interesting. Like much more so than any other DC animated movie. It very much kind of has that Grant Morrison sensibility to it.
Sure. Of course, Grant Morrison, he's basically Grant Morrison. I always like Morrison's Superman stuff better than his Batman stuff, because that Batman stuff, I think he goes a little too dark and a little more convoluted and dark on Batman. Superman, though, he relishes the Silver Age, and it's kind of what the animated series kind of flirted with at times. It goes goes full Monty with it in a way. It's like, yes, that is the Silver Age, and we're owning all of it. And Superman being that adaptable character, that's nice. And I think All-Star Superman, honestly, at the end of the day, some people might lynch me for this, but I gotta tell you, I think All-Star Superman is a better dying Superman. I think it's more interesting to see a dying Superman than like the whole death of Superman thing. And I think All-Stars, at the end of the day, it's been remembered as being the smarter kind of Superman story than the death of Superman, where, again, that story gets interesting, the whole like world without Superman.
Death of Superman is kind of like the iconic cultural impact, but All-Star Superman is sort of like all the emotional heft. Not that heft in a sophisticated kind of way.
Exactly. And again, Death of Superman, Act 2 is the big sell. Like Act 2, then Act 1, but Act 3 is where it all gets real silly. And like, okay, a lot of extra Superman here. And of course, like, I don't really care if he comes back at this point. It's just getting kind of silly.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this point is All-Star. I'll admit, yeah, the book has a lot more stuff, but I really like the animated movie. A lot of people say like, they cut out half all the good stuff. I don't know, I liked it.
Okay, but like I said, to my point, it's fucking Grant Morrison. I mean, Grant Morrison is a hard guy to adapt.
Exactly, and that's the point. Absolutely. And like, I'll say this: the big sell, the whole Clark and Lex stuff. I love how Grant Morrison writes Lex Luthor. I really do. And the big ending of that movie, the whole where Lex kind of sees things Superman's way, and Superman kind of confronts Lex with the fact that he could save humanity if he really wanted to. So that movie, it's a great emotional piece, it's a great testament to the Superman character. And yes, it's missing some extra good stuff, but again, Morrison hard to adapt. So Superman versus the Elite is a really great piece. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, this really this really surprised me. It definitely. I love how the storyline is almost just kind of like a singular event, like stretched out into a movie, but in a good way, not in a bad way. It's a very self-contained story, but it's very driven on philosophy.
What's so smart is that they pulled an Under the Red Hood with this, where this adapts a story and they used the same writer on the animated movie. They had Joe Kelly, one of the best Deadpool writers ever, by the way. He wrote this, and he wrote it from a place of anger. Basically, he wrote the story and he adapted this in response to people saying, Superman's boring. He's all milquetoast and Boy Scout. What's so great about Truth, Justice, and the American Way, which is the name of the original story, by the way. What's wrong with Truth, Justice, and the American Way? It's a gutsy show. Just to boil it down here, it's a real. At the end of the day, Superman vs. the Elite is a great testament to why Superman has to be the moral, upstanding character that he is. It boils down to the third act, where it's a real gutsy show of what. It's a real gutsy show of what an ideal through. What an idea through the cynical times, like the cynical wish of what if we went.
I actually can you even hear me right now?
I can hear you, but I'll get a little dicey at times.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, man. We really need to kind of.
All right. All right. Okay, let's.
I mean, like we've been going really, really good with the conversation so far. It's just like obviously it's just the technical. I don't want to like stall for like, oh my.
Let me ask you this: would you like me to? Would you like to do like a reboot and I can take them through the animated stuff? Would you want to attempt that, or should we just like fast track the DCU?
God, what do we do? And you know what I'm gonna do?
Yeah. What? I've kind of okay. Go on.
I'm gonna restart my computer. Just
keep going.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I'm gonna fast track us through the DC animated stuff here just for a moment, folks. Okay. So again, Superman versus the Elite. It's kind of a gutsy show of what an ideal through kind of the cynical wish that we've all had at some time. Kind of the cynical wish. It shows what that looks like. Like, what if Superman went the extra mile? What if he killed the bad guys? It's a real gutsy adult debate. Like, should Superman kill? How far should we go? It's a great debate, and I think the answer in the movie is, we should be aware of we should be aware of what happens. We should be aware of the stakes. We shouldn't be ignorant to it, but we should be aware of things, but not change who we are. And I think that's the end. That's the lesson that we kind of get at the end of the movie, which is very interesting. And again, like Superman just shows the heart of like, hey, you guys want me to be this way. This is what it would look like, of course, without doing any irresponsible collateral damage. That's unheard of with Superman. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So just bridging off of that idea of kind of these big, interesting moral questions with Superman, of course, should a hero kill? We do get that answered in another animated film that is excellent, that Tiki and I, we've spoken of at length, Justice League Gods and Monsters. So that's kind of the last big Superman animated film we're going to touch on here, is that Justice League Gods and Monsters features a very interesting Elseworlds take on Superman, where he is the son of Zod. Like, what if, basically, what if Zod, General Zod, when Krypton was going, what if he imprinted his DNA off of like the embryo that created a baby, and that baby was, sorry, Zod. No, I'm sorry, that is General Zod. It's basically, what if General Zod imprinted his DNA and created not Kal-El, but another baby, and that baby basically did not land in sunny old optimistic Kansas. What if that baby landed in the hands of Mexican migrant workers? And that's what we see. We get to see kind of a Superman who's kind of on the raw end of the American dream, which is really fascinating. And we get to see. In the animated film, we don't really get a lot of this. We get this teased in a lot of places, and there's a lot of great supplementary backstory, and there's this great like one-shot comic that Tiki and I were really enamored with about This Superman, this Hernan Guerrera, that's the name of the Superman. He's Hernan Guerrera, and he basically is the son of Zod, the son of this Kryptonian dictator. But he doesn't know that. He thinks, he has like this almost a fragmented backstory. He has like like a corrupted audio file. And he watches this, and his assumption is that his father was Jor-El. Essentially, was like one of the great scientists, the great leaders of the world. He doesn't know his father was like a dictator who was responsible for the ruin of Krypton. So it's like, what if a guy got the harsh side of the American dream? Like, we learn in his backstory, he had this really wonderful family, these good people, this migrant family they worked on a farm and they believed in the American ideal. And like his father could get angry at him, but he would never hit him. And his mother was a religious woman, and his sister, he accidentally, and basically having kind of that Zod in him, that whole like, hey, you can climb that tree. She tries climbing a tree, she falls and she paralyzes herself. And it's a beautiful story, just that one issue comic. But even taking that out of the equation, it's the relationships that really define this character and get this character to a place where, he's not a bad guy, but he's doing really horrific General Zod type stuff that, again, serve what we might need in the real world with superheroes. People, basically kind of the next phase of a military hero. Like, people are going to kill in the field and kind of like work in tandem with the government. It's interesting, but it's more interesting is a Superman who, as we've seen, like, shorts, like Machinima did a few shorts here, where we have this short where we have this Hernan Guerrero Superman, Benjamin Bratt voicing him, by the way. Benjamin Bratt, wonderful actor who, again, people like Tiki and myself, we went nuts for in Coco. I've seen him in other things like The Infiltrator. He's an excellent actor. He's perfect for this Superman, again, this hard-edged Superman who still has a soul, because he kills this perverse kid version of Brainiac, because the kid basically begs him for a mercy killing, like, please, I can't control my powers. And this is a Superman who's lived this hard life, and he can't teach this kid how to control his powers on the fly. It's like, I'm no teacher, kid. I know how to end this. And he heat visions him, but we have this beautiful little moment where you see this Superman, he still shivers. Again, he's the son of Zod, and he shivers from like the horrible act that he's committed. That has a soul, has a human side. He still can't live with a human family. If anything, his belief in the American ideal, he knows that it's flawed. He's trying to make it work by force. So it's this beautiful little story that we have told, and of course, forming a very forceful Justice League. I'm sorry, folks, I'm a little rambling. I'm rambling a little on this, but let me get to the whole Justice League gods and monsters of it all here, where he has a really great dynamic with Batman, with the Michael C. Hall, Kirk Langstrom Batman, a Batman who is, yes, a vampire, and it works. It's he has a great dynamic where he kind of found him, and he didn't teach him how to use his powers, but he saw a desperation in another person, and that really kind of forged their relationship. So again, it's the hello. Let's see. So again, it's kind of like a hero with a potential to be a dictator. It's kind of like when will the other shoe drop? Will he ever realize this? And the fact that when he realizes this, he still remains a good character. He still remains like, I'm going to be in service of what's right here. But again, what's right on my own terms. So fellas, I think just to kind of summarize it a little here, because we can go on to a whole analysis of Justice League gods and monsters. The point is, it's a different Superman. Of course, I think with all the DC original animated films, that's really what we're talking about here. You really get to explore Superman in animation better. Hello? All right. Sorry about that, folks.
Man, I'm still having technical difficulties. You're going to have to...
Oh, you're back. You're back. I can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm back, but I'm still like... I'm laggy as fuck, so you're just going to have to end this, man. I mean, don't end it, but like I'm not sure how much more I can contribute with my computer at the status that it is right now.
All right. Okay, so I was wrapping up the DC original animated film stuff anyway. So okay. So we explore Superman animation, and we see he's better He's better served than his Justice League team-ups, it would seem, in animation, where you get to really spend time with the character. And, of course, in the DCEU, let's move on to live action here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Man, my computer is just like, I had to restart my computer, and now it's just like, it's acting like it's at a glow. Now I have the settings menu open. I'm trying to click cancel on it, and it's a whole big thing. Anyways, the DCEU. Superman sucks except for the one scene in Man of Steel, and then in Justice League he's okay. The end.
God. It's not cynical at all. He's not entirely wrong though, folks. Look, I'll keep it simple. Man of Steel, good concept in taking Superman in a cynical world. Execution was a bit off. Cavill's an excellent Superman. Love the bit where he saves a soldier. We got some cool action. The Lois-Superman relationship's good. But then we get to Batman v Superman. Batman v Superman, Cavill plays a conflicted man, uncomfortable being a god. Yet, I'm sorry?
No, I'm literally staring at a blank screen right now. Frankly, I'm shocked you can even hear me.
Okay. So,
like, I'm not even going to have... And like, this is ridiculous. I've never seen it. I've never seen my computer glitch out like this.
Maybe it's Brainiac. No, I'm kidding. All right, we'll press on through. We're almost there.
Yeah, but I don't know how to end it once we end it. That's the thing. Like, I literally don't have a stop broadcast button.
Well, worst case scenario, I guess we'll leave the call, or just we'll wait until time runs out.
I guess that's what we'll have to do. Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be like an after show or something. I don't know. We'll figure out something.
So, you can still hear me, Dragon. I'm utterly shocked. It's a fucking miracle you can still hear me.
All right. Okay, so briefly, Batman v Superman again. Cavill is just playing conflicted. He's playing that well, but there's no story to support it, which is unfortunate. He doesn't play a happy Superman, which is baffling to me. And we do some ridiculous contrivances.
Batman versus Superman, he spends the whole movie being an emo git.
Well, it's a little harsh, but not inaccurate. It always bothers me. He has no real conversation with Batman. It's just like he's like, "Hey, stop being Batman," and that's about it. That's the most conversation he gets from him. Then they're fighting. And it's like, Bruce, you have to listen to me. Like, you have no bond with this guy. We didn't even establish. There's a lot of editing faux pas in Batman v Superman, and of course, the whole Luthor thing definitely it was just not good. All right, so there are a lot of big problems with the Batman v Superman, and then we get to Justice League, where again, just to summarize it, Tiki I think hit it right on the head, is that we really fixed Superman. Cavill's playing the Superman he's always been dying to play. We still have to live with the mistake of we killed Superman way too early, we did Doomsday way too early, and we're just trying to fix that retroactively. But in the process, we're pretending we had a Superman that we didn't have. But what we do get, though, is a hopeful and classic Superman. He's more a natural hero, and a hero. And we see he's a natural hero at the very beginning. He's a natural hero at the beginning with the opening with the kids. Where he's podcasting with the kids, and it's delightful. And of course, the hero fight, we do that much better than we did in Batman v Superman, where we have the heroes fighting a Superman who's out of sorts, and it's very well executed.
Yeah, honestly, Dragon, I really do feel like, I know it's a controversial opinion and like no one shares it for some reason, but to me, Justice League is a very, very, very imperfect movie, but it's probably the most watchable of all the DCEU movies for me. And I guess that's just me coming as someone who really thinks that the third act of Wonder Woman just kind of tanks the whole movie. Because I guess Wonder Woman is probably overall the stronger movie, but if I have the choice to sit down and watch Wonder Woman again or sit down and watch Justice League again, I think there's more highs throughout the movie in Justice League.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think Superman and characters like Superman, and specifically, some people are harsh on the Flash. I like the Flash in that movie, specifically the whole.
I like the Flash in that movie, and I don't know why anyone's harsh on it. I think they're just being unfair and comparing it to freaking Grant Gustin.
That's what I'm saying. I think that's pretty much the opinion on that. Regardless, so again, all the Superman dealing with the Flash and Batman and the Flash, but again, specifically, Superman is really he kind of is the MVP of the movie. The movie. I think that's where Justice League shines at its brightest points when we utilize Superman. We utilize him pretty well in the movie. And again, we're fixing the issues of the DCU Superman. So again, we did good strides in Justice League with Superman. So and
it's kind of scary that it might be the last time we see Henry Cavill as Superman, because it's kind of like right when it kind of continues the Superman curse, Dragon. Like, you know, right when Cavill was like at his peak, he gets struck down by external circumstances that are going against the DCEU at this point.
That's a very interesting segue, because now we're getting to kind of the reflection and kind of the general future of Superman here. So in the future, I will say this. So right now what we have with Superman is we have an actor on Supergirl who I think is doing a really good job. Tyler Hoechlin, if I'm probably butchering that last name. But the point is, the Superman who is very briefly used on Supergirl from time to time, I think is great.
I definitely think he's got a good kind of like grasp on the Clark versus Superman dynamic from what I've seen of him.
Yes, and he's kind of again, I'm not saying that he is like on the same level as Reeve, because we use him very sparingly, but he's kind of like he's kind of aiming for Christopher Reeve. Like, he saves people and then he gives them a wink and he flies off. That's delightful. That's Superman to me. And Clark Kent like talking to Perry White on the cell phone. Like, we've seen some fun things with Superman. And that's the biggest complaint people have with Supergirl, is that, man, that season 2 kicked off so fantastically. We had Superman, it means we're like a real show now. We're acknowledging we've seen the cousin. Why can't we do? Some people said they want a Superman spinoff with that guy. And I got to tell you, it's been a while since we ever had an Honest to Goodness Superman show. I'd like to see that too.
I'd be down for that, man. I'd probably watch that from the beginning if we got that.
Yeah, because right now they haven't shown Luthor yet, but they've done his sister, who's from the comics, and again, his sister's really good in the show too. Again, Supergirl has a lot of potential, and when we introduce deep cut Superman character, or like, major Superman characters, it's a good move. We got to do more of that. Speaking of kind of stuff we have with Superman, Krypton. I'll say this much: I know you haven't watched Krypton. It's not I don't think you need to, but look,
I had a feeling, Dragon. I had a feeling.
I think like Krypton's like something I can in good conscience say you're gonna love, because I really don't think you will. Well, Krypton's an acquired taste. If you really like the opening of Man of Steel, you'll like Krypton. It's an odd choice not to
I think the opening of Man of Steel is probably better than anything else in that movie, but I still don't think it's amazing. Yeah,
that's the thing. So at the end of the day, Krypton they made a really odd choice not going with Jor-El. They went with Superman's great-grand, like the father of Jor-El for the show, and I don't know if they're going anywhere with that. They did like a brief 8-episode season. And they're doing a season 2, which is baffling to me, but they are. Because this is something they've had this in the pipeline for many years, and they finally realized it. So that's why they're doing it now, and appropriately on the 80th year of Superman. So I guess that's kind of cool. I'll say this though. Here's the reason I watch the show. I watch the show because I do like seeing the Kryptonian culture. You got some good fashion stuff there. I'll spoil this because again, I doubt anyone's really going to watch it if I don't tell them this. They do a really great thing with General Zod in that show, because they General Zod time travel. So we have Zod, who we basically learn. I'll spoil this, folks. So prepare Krypton spoiler. So Adam Strange time travels to basically save Superman from being killed by Brainiac. Brainiac he time traveled to destroy Krypton earlier than he did. And in doing so, Brainiac's the main bad guy. Brainiac is cool. We've never seen Brainiac realized in live action. I got to tell you, that Brainiac does look really cool in this show. And so the idea is General Zod then time travels with his own agenda, of course, of saving his own existence, saving Krypton. He basically wants to maybe save Krypton and be the kind of the ruler of Krypton. And we learn that Jor-El and Zod are blood brothers. They have the same parents, which is kind of mind-blowing. And the point is, they got a really good actor to play Zod too. He was Colin something. He was in Limitless, and he was Walter on Arrow seasons 1 and 2. People will recognize him. He was in Punisher Warzone as Budiansky. The point is, they got a good actor to play Zod, and I was really in favor of it. So doing this Death of Superman animated film that I'm rooting for a change. Like, oh my god, they could actually get this one right. I'm rooting for it. So again, this is bridging it in general future talk. The main thing for the future I want to see. Henry Cavill deserves to keep playing Superman.
He really, really needs at least a Man of Steel too. I really,
Yeah. he loves that character, and he represented that character so well. Again, the writing wasn't supporting him in Batman v Superman. That's not his fault. He was playing a conflicted Superman. The problem is they didn't give him anything after that. You know. Speaking of which, again, only
I really do feel like for how divisive Justice League was, I feel like everyone agrees that Supes was the best part of that movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think I would like a Luthor that measures up to basically. My dream with Lex Luthor is I want a Luthor that would measure up to what we have with like the Kingpin in the Netflix series. I want a villain that compelling with Lex Luthor. I really want that. Unfortunately, Eisenberg does not seem to be. I mean, look, he could blow us away in a film, but right now the DCU.
That's what I'm saying, Dragon. You saw The Social Network. God damn it, that kid has the potential to be an amazing Lex Luthor.
Even so, he could still impress, but he wouldn't be that Kingpin level. If we ever recast Luthor, points if we ever do, which is possible. At the very least, look, broad spectrum. All I'm saying is that
I honestly don't think we can recast Luthor without recasting Superman. Also.
I'll say this. I think, I'm going to hold out hopes that there's a chance in the DCEU, if they do the smart approach.
Excuse me.
They do, I think the smart approach of the DCEU is that we're going to keep the actors that worked, and we're just going to we'll just kind of go into each movie. It's just how it comes. We're going to keep like the Gal Gadots and the Henry Cavills, and then the rest will be a roll of the dice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the smart way of approaching. We keep actors they've earned it, or they're really beloved, and I think it's the smart approach. So, in general, because of that, we could maybe get like a different Luthor in terms of villain in the future. Everyone wants Brainiac, but we're kind of getting on Krypton. But who cares?
Oh, I'd love to see Bizarro as a villain in a live action movie.
Absolutely. I mean, we should have gotten Bizarro either in Superman 4 or in Batman v Superman, but we didn't. So it's about time we get Bizarro having his due on the big screen and done right here. I want to see a Bizarro with a backwards S. Is that so much to ask? Even in animation, we never give him the backwards S. I want him to have the backwards S. How hard is that? Let's see. I was dying. I wanted Metallo, but the problem was in Age of Ultron. They got scared off of having Metallo in Batman v Superman because of Age of Ultron. It always bothered me. I want Metallo. Darn it.
I mean, if the animated series episode is any equivalent, I can see the Ultron comparisons, but at the same time, they are very different characters.
But I'm saying you saw the episode. That's essentially what I wanted in Batman v Superman, that Luthor and Metallo story. I kind of wanted that in Batman v Superman.
I'm going to throw out a kind of a random wild card thing for the future of Superman, Dragon.
Sure. What do you got?
I would love a really, really kick-ass open world Superman video game.
Oh, sure.
Let's redeem Superman 64.
There is a chance that might be in development right now. Rocksteady, I guess they were supposed to do this at E3, but they said they apologized for a delay. So I don't know if it means they're still working on it or what. But there's rumors of a Superman game by Rocksteady.
That'd be really. I'd be really into that. Also, maybe even a more wild card suggestion. But how awesome would it be to get, kind of maybe in the style of Into the Spider-Verse, an animated Superman movie that's kind of like an update on the Fletcher style?
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
Right.
I gotta tell you though, Tiki, seriously, Rob Pratt. If they're gonna go to anybody on the Fletcher style, they gotta go to this Rob Pratt guy because he knows how to do the Fletcher style, and that's the thing. Honestly, here's the thing. He does these great shorts, and if they gave him either an animated series or an animated movie as a tribute to the Fletcher series, that's what I'd love to see, honestly, because he's kind of basically adding to the mythos of the Fletcher Superman with that Bizarro Superman short. And that's the thing. He could go places with that idea, I think.
I could talk about the future of the Superman roller coaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain if you want, Dragon. There's some interesting things happening with that.
Maybe not. Let's so here's what we'll do. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's make some final thoughts here, and then we'll have an after shows general Superman talk, and we'll see what happens.
Wait, what do you mean an after show of general Superman talk?
Well, again, we're just kind of waiting until do we have an off air button yet?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I should have updated you. Yeah, we're good to go. We can stop at any time now.
Okay, well then just I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to rush you then. So is there any other future things you want to hit on?
Well, can I since we're already almost 3 hours in, can I tell you about the Superman ride for shits and giggles?
Sure, but real quick, is there anything you really wanted, any burning things you wanted to say about Superman versus the Elite? Because I didn't get anything I wanted to. You want to?
I mean, I'm sure you covered it very well. I really love the villains in that. I love the moment where Clark overhears the little kid talking about how he thinks that killing would be fun. That was a fantastically well done sequence.
That's a huge moment.
And just in general, like I said, I feel like the best thing about that movie is that it's a very, very condensed incident. You know what I mean? It's like a domino effect that, like, you know, Superman randomly teaming up with this one group of people kind of caused, like, you know, like, it's almost kind of like Superman was inspiring to people in the wrong way in that movie, which was a really interesting idea to explore.
That is the fascinating thing about that movie, T, because you get to see that, you know, Manchester Black, that's the main. But they're called the Elite. Those guys, that's their name, and they're called the Elite. So they form a team in the book. They were spent. Honestly, it was so fascinating that they did this as like a one-off comic, a one-off issue, and people loved it so much. Then they brought them back into like a whole like line of Elite comics and stuff. Like, it was interesting. And yeah, that was the thing the animated film really hit on even better than the original source material, where they showed that, you know, the Elite came from a place of liking Superman and just like, you know, we like this guy, he just doesn't go far enough. And you get to see him, Mary pushes Manchester in the field like, hey, you can do this. And he's inspiring them in the field. And it's like, yeah, we can do this, and we can go even further.
It's almost kind of like a Luke Skywalker, Kylo Ren thing. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh man, I really messed up.
How terrifying was that? How terrifying was the twisted Superman at the end there, where he was basically scaring, you know, basically the Superman putting on the very scary performance. I'm saying, like, how was it, like, you know, the whole, like, you know, when you throw him into the air, his lungs go pop. You know, that whole. All right, never mind. Okay, anything you want to say on because of the only other thing I really wanted to, if you wanted to say anything about Benjamin Bratt's Superman, you know, Hernan Guerrero, Justly God.
I mean, I'm sure you did a good job covering it. Like, Benjamin Bratt Superman is just a really, really inspired idea, and I'm glad we have it. It's like a really cool kind of like Elseworlds take on the character.
Oh, speaking of which, okay, here's one bit of future thing I have before we get into your roller coaster thing.
Okay.
Yeah, again, out of all the Superman works to be adapted, because right now we're doing Death of Superman in 2 parts, you know, like Dark Knight Returns, which again, it's the in continuity universe, but again, after Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, it looks like they have a grasp on using that continuity to their advantage for a change instead of like as a hindrance. So I'm more excited for that than I have been before, and because again, I was looking forward to the idea before I found out. I was like, oh man, in continuity begins Suicide Squad. Oh, it's a game changer. Beyond that, there are only 2 other Superman stories I'd like to see adapted. Red Son, I think everybody wants to see Red Son. They want to see the whole the big Elseworld story, the whole you know, Superman if he was raised by Russians. And the other one is this beautiful story that if they ever wanted to do a film that naturally felt like the Richard Donner Superman, they do Superman for All Seasons. It's 4 vignettes. It's 4 vignette stories about through different perspectives of Superman characters. Like, I think one's Clark, one's Jonathan Kent, one's Lex Luthor, and one's God, I think it's Lois. It's been a while since I've read it. I think it's Lois. All right, so the Super Coaster. What do you got?
Okay, so yeah, kind of a random point to end on, but we'll do final thoughts after this, I guess. Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and screen share an image of. God, hopefully this doesn't bug out my, no, I think we're good. Gonna go ahead and screen share an image of the coaster just so you know what we're dealing with here. Okay, there we go. So as you see, you kind of enter the coaster through the Fortress of Solitude.
That's nice.
And the coaster itself is basically just like you go up the big fucking tower and you go down the tower. There's not much to it. So basically what the new ride is going to be is you get launched up the tower, and then at the very top of the tower, which is about 400 feet tall, you flip upside down, and then you go down the other side. As it stands now, it's 2 tracks. This is going to connect the 2 tracks. So you flip upside down, you go down the other side, and then what it does is it kind of goes back over the station, over the Fortress of Solitude, and does a bunch of turns and stuff and helixes before going back into the station, which would make it like a complete full circuit coaster with the world's highest inversion by a pretty considerable margin.
Huh.
So what do you think, Dragon? Would you ride that 400-foot tall monstrosity?
Me, God, no. All
right.
I do love the design of this ride, though. I love the Fortress out exterior. I think it's great.
It's really cool. I mean, it's not like Disney level theming, but it's, you know, it's cool enough to be immersive as you walk in. As you walk in, it's all air conditioned.
Nice.
All right, so Dragon, let's get to final thoughts, because this is kind of this is the first marathon, like 2-hour 45-minute podcast we've done in a while, and I promised you it'd be a 3-hour podcast, and I delivered on it. So I guess final thoughts on my end, folks. This has been kind of a great long journey. It's, like I said, it's kind of a good throwback to the ye old days of just really covering a subject in detail here on the channel, but I don't know. Dragon, I feel like you're going to sum it up with like a really eloquent soliloquy about the awesomeness that is Superman. So I kind of want to just pass the mic off to you. But at the end of the day, like I said, folks, like I said at the very beginning of this thing, if you actually are crazy enough to watch this podcast all the way through from beginning to end, Superman is like the world's most charismatic and cool museum artifact, where I feel like that's a big part of his appeal, is the fact that he is a cultural touchstone. He is this kind of, like, he's as American as apple pie and baseball. It's like apple pie, baseball, Superman. That defines our goddamn country. And I really think that's a fascinating thing in pop culture. And Superman might not be the most deep or complex character in the world, but as we've kind of talked through with all these different various incarnations, you know, through the kind of the dramatic heft, but the light storytelling of the Fleischer stuff, to the kind of Big Blue Boy Scout of the George Reeves stuff, then the cinematic kind of roller coaster that the Christopher Reeves saga was, all the way up until the really sophisticated storytelling of the DCEU stuff. We've really kind of run the gambit. You know, we kind of got the dark nihilistic take on Superman to very mixed results. We've really run the gambit on the character, and I think that kind of proves that the character is much more malleable than people give him credit for. And it's just, it's kind of crazy to think that, honestly, Dragon, this is kind of my thoughts to sum it up here. 80 years is a long time, but Superman is a character that feels like he's just he's mythic in a way. So even though 80 years is a very considerable amount of time, like, I almost feel like it's weird that Superman is just 80 years old. You know what I mean? It's like, it's weird that Superman as a human being could very well be alive and healthy right now from when he was first born. You know what I mean? Considering just how big of an impact he has had on the planet and the cultural zeitgeist as a whole, I feel like 80 years is kind of, it's surreal. Like, in the grand spectrum of what Superman has accomplished, 80 years doesn't feel like a really long time for the character. And I think that's kind of the best thing I can say about him. He's a very larger than life symbol, that Big Blue Boy Scout.
Right. All right.
All right, take it away, Chief.
Here are my final thoughts. All right, so, folks, 80 years, big accomplishment. So Superman is a classic and universally adored character. You know, he's on that iconic level. You know, the fact that he was the first hero, and I like to think we love him not for the powers, or, you know, the fantasy of the powers, or the action, the fact, you know, he punches bad guys a lot. You know, it's like, you know, the whole, he punches like a giant kryptonite mountain. You know, he's punching like Mongol in the face. But I think we like him for his morality and his dependability. It's, you know, it's a symbol of hope, not just the symbol on his chest, not just like the whole, you know, it's not ness, it's hope, which is not a bad line, by the way.
Yeah, it is, but I don't want to debate about that right now.
The point is, regardless of whether you interpret that symbol directly as translation of hope or not, he himself is a symbol of hope. That that things will get better. That he's the guy you see on the worst day of your life, and when he's in your life, you feel that great sense of relief of just like, oh, thank goodness, Superman. It's like it's the hope that things aren't that bad. That there's always I can't tell you how many times I've read scenes or I've seen scenes of Superman, like even in the Christmas specials, they get obscure with this here. Miximus, it's a beautiful scene where Superman he's caught in this time loop, and he knows that this bank is robbed, and he stops the bank from being robbed. I know it's very Groundhog's Day inspired, but just go with me on this. He keeps stopping the bank from being robbed, and then he kind of thinks forward here, and he thinks like Superman does here, where he goes to the bank robber and he says, "Hey, don't do this." He talks to him. He solves his problem. He ushers him like, things can't be that bad. You being in prison is not going to help your family. He approaches. He's a people person. That's what Superman is. He's the guy who's like, it's not all bad. I can remember a scene from All-Star Superman, the comic, and it would have been great to be in the anime movie, but again, Morrison's hard to adapt. There's this beautiful little moment where, it's like 3 panels, and I've met the artist who did this. And the artist, Frank Quietly, he's an excellent artist. Again, they kind of adapt the style the best they could in the movie. There's a scene where this girl, Superman, he hears everybody, and he hears like all these conversations, these phone calls, and he hears like this girl who's basically her therapist is desperately begging her, like, hey, don't hang up the phone, I'm going to be there. And basically, you see this girl on top of a ledge she's thrown her cell phone off the edge. And she's in utter, you see, she's tears, and like she's contemplating taking a step off there. And importantly, we don't have Superman catching her. Superman, we don't even see his face. He plops down from behind her, and he says, I heard the other end of the phone call. He basically checked it out. He says, your therapist really was stuck in traffic. He wasn't just like come up with an excuse. And he says, I won't save you if you don't want me to. And basically he gives her time of day, and she hugs him. And it's like, that was enough. Just Superman is that the worst day of your life, you want that person there. You want just that inkling.
Okay, that's like a powerful statement right there, to give a suicidal person a choice. Like that's bold storytelling right there.
It's like, hey, if you don't want me to, I won't catch you. It's your choice. And it's so, again, it's the fact that Superman's going to be there. He's going to be that understanding voice. He's going to be the person you want on the worst day of your life. He's not a god. He's not a deterrent. He's not even. In some respects, he's a problem solver. He's not an instant solution, is what I'm getting. He's not an instant problem solver. He's not like, hey, our answers are prayer. We don't need to forget the cops, forget the police force, forget the firefighters. We have Superman. Darn it, it's not an easy thing, because we have real life heroes. We have real life worries and struggles. Otherwise, we defeat the purpose of the character. But at the end of the day, he's just a humble immigrant from a dying planet who saw good in the world, which created Superman that good. The Kents, the Ma and Pa Kent, they created Superman with the ideal, which is that simple, that simplistic Kansas farm boy ideal that, he's just the ideal of a good person. He's not the ideal of a god or something we should strive for. He ends up being that, but that's not what he is at his core. It's a reflection of where Superman is at after 80 years, is that we redefine how valuable he is in our ever-evolving times. We redefine ourselves, therefore we redefine Superman. But at his core, he was this kid from a dying world who didn't know where he came from, and he just happened to have these abilities, and just happened that he chose to do the right thing because good people raised him. Superman is he is the superhero. I mean, look.
Oh yeah, no, definitively, absolutely.
He is the superhero in so many ways, and without him, we don't have Batman. We don't have Marvel. We don't have, again, the concept of the superhero would be not without Superman. We owe Superman a lot, and at the end of the day, it's not an issue of are we reliant on Superman, or are we overly reliant, or do we need Superman? It's a matter of just being appreciative. We shouldn't factor in a lot of this stuff with Superman. We shouldn't factor in what does Superman mean? What does he mean to you? What does he mean to me? And don't get me wrong, it's a nice thought, but at the end of the day, it's not like a reliance question. It's not like what does he mean to our culture. It's just like the 80th anniversary at this point, and on like a Superman day or like whenever day you want to like consider this thought, it's just a matter of being appreciative of a character like Superman. We just gotta appreciate him. We gotta appreciate this character who's endured 80 years now, and he's still teaching us new things. He's just there for us after 80 years and still going strong. That to me is Superman.
All right, well said, Dragon. Well said. I don't think I could say it any better than that. We're just going to end it right now. I don't have any funny puns or anything to end it off on. Thanks for joining us, folks. It's been a hell of a time. It's been a marathon podcast, and happy birthday, Soups.